Alexander Morgan's polished Italian leather shoes clicked rhythmically against the marble floor of his corporate headquarters as he strode toward the elevator. At 45, he commanded respect with his mere presence. 6'2" with salt and pepper hair that only enhanced his distinguished appearance and piercing blue eyes that had stared down countless business rivals. The building itself, a 60-story glass monolith in downtown Manhattan, bore his name in gleaming letters. Morgan Enterprises, valued at just over $8 billion, represented everything he had sacrificed the last 20 years to build. "Your car is waiting, Mr. Morgan," his assistant Vanessa informed him as she handed him his schedule for the following day. "And don't forget the charity gala tomorrow evening." Alexander nodded curtly. "Make sure Johnson has the acquisition papers ready by morning. I want this deal closed before the weekend." The elevator doors closed, leaving him alone with his thoughts as he descended toward the underground parking garage where his driver waited. These quiet moments were rare, fleeting intervals between the relentless demands of board meetings, international calls, and strategic planning sessions. Sometimes, in these brief silences, unwanted memories would surface of laughter, of holidays spent on Mediterranean beaches, of Jessica. He pushed the thought away. 5 years had passed since their divorce. 5 years since he'd come home to find half the closet empty and divorce papers on the kitchen counter. "You've married your company, Alex," her handwritten note had said. "I can't compete anymore." The elevator chimed as it reached the parking level. His driver, Marcus, was waiting with the door of the black Maybach open. "Evening, Mr. Morgan. Straight home tonight?" "Yes," Alexander replied, sliding into the leather interior. "And Marcus, take the route through Central Park. I need some time to review these figures." As the car pulled away from the building, Alexander loosened his tie slightly and began scanning the quarterly reports. The Morgan Technologies division was outperforming projections by 18%, news that would please the shareholders at next week's meeting. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from his current girlfriend, Sophia, a 30-year-old gallery owner he'd been seeing for the past few months. "Still on for dinner at 9?" he replied with a simple yes and returned to his reports. The car slowed as they approached a red light at Fifth Avenue. Alexander glanced up momentarily, his gaze drifting across the early evening cityscape. That's when he saw her. Standing on the corner, holding the hands of 2 small boys who looked to be about 4 years old, was Jessica. Her once perfectly highlighted hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her designer clothes replaced by worn jeans and a faded jacket that seemed too thin for the October chill. But what struck him most was her expression, a look of weary resignation as she checked the contents of her wallet before stuffing it back into her pocket with obvious disappointment. Alexander felt a jolt of recognition that quickly hardened into something else. Vindication, perhaps. She had left him after all, left the life he had provided, the security, the luxury. Whatever financial struggles she was facing now were of her own making. "Drive on, Marcus," he said as the light turned green. But his eyes remained fixed on the rearview mirror, on Jessica and the 2 small boys, twins from the look of them, until they disappeared from view. He returned to his reports, but the numbers now seemed to blur together. The image of Jessica standing on that street corner kept intruding. The twins had to be hers. But whose? Had she remarried? The boys were too young to have been conceived during their marriage. They had been trying for a child those last few years together, with no success. The fertility treatments, the scheduled intimacy, the disappointment each month, it had been another source of tension between them. By the time the car pulled up to his penthouse apartment, Alexander had abandoned any pretense of working. He dismissed Marcus for the evening and rode the private elevator up to his home, a 7,000-square-foot monument to modern luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city he'd conquered. Alexander poured himself 2 fingers of 30-year-old Macallan and walked to the windows. The city lights twinkled below, but all he could see was Jessica's face, the 2 small boys, the worn jacket. Had it been coincidence? In a city of 8 million people, What were the odds of seeing his ex-wife on a random street corner? He pulled out his phone and hesitated only briefly before calling his head of security. "Frank, I need information on Jessica Morgan. Correction, Jessica Whitman now, I suppose. She's back in New York. I want to know where she's living, her financial situation, employment status. And she has children, twin boys, about 4 years old. I want to know everything." "Yes, sir. I'll have a preliminary report by morning." Alexander ended the call and drained his whiskey. He was being ridiculous, allowing himself to be distracted by a chance encounter with his past. Jessica had made her choice. She had walked away from everything he offered. Whatever situation she found herself in now was none of his concern. He had a company to run, a new acquisition to complete, a girlfriend waiting for him at an exclusive restaurant in less than an hour. He needed to shower, change, move on with his evening as planned. Yet as he stood in the shower, letting the hot water cascade over him, Alexander couldn't shake the image of those two small boys, couldn't ignore the nagging question of who their father might be. And deeper still, a question he was even less comfortable acknowledging. Why did Jessica look so defeated, so worn down by life, when she had always been so full of vitality? "Not my problem," he muttered to himself as he dressed in a fresh suit. "Not my concern." But it was this same mantra that Jessica had thrown in his face during their final argument. "Nothing is ever your problem, Alex. Nothing beyond those balance sheets and profit margins." His phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Preliminary information. Jessica Whitman residing in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. Employment. Part-time at a community center. Financial status. Concerning. More details tomorrow." Alexander frowned at the message. Queens? Jessica, who had once decorated their home with artwork worth millions, who had moved through high society with effortless grace, was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens with twin boys? He texted Sophia, canceling their dinner with a vague excuse about a business emergency. Then he called Marcus. "I need the car again. There's an address in Queens I want to visit." An hour later, Alexander was sitting in his parked car across the street from a rundown apartment building in a neighborhood that made his security team nervous. The facade was crumbling in places, graffiti marked one wall, and the security door at the entrance had a broken lock. According to Frank's information, Jessica and her sons lived on the 3rd floor. "Sir, I really must advise against you going in there alone," Marcus said, his usual professional demeanor cracking with genuine concern. "I'm not going in," Alexander replied, his eyes fixed on the building entrance. "I just wanted to see." But as the words left his mouth, the door opened and Jessica emerged with the twins. The boys were bundled in jackets that looked slightly too large for them, probably second-hand or purchased with room to grow. Jessica herself wore the same thin jacket from earlier. She was carrying a bag that appeared to contain laundry. "Laundromat 2 blocks east," Marcus commented, following Alexander's gaze. "Probably no washer in the building." Alexander watched as Jessica bent down to adjust one of the boys' jackets, saying something that made both children laugh. Even from this distance, he could see her smile, the same radiant smile that had captivated him at a charity function 17 years earlier, when she'd been a 23-year-old art student volunteering at the event and he'd been a hungry young executive on the rise. Before he could reconsider, Alexander found himself opening the car door. "Wait here," he instructed Marcus, who looked deeply uncomfortable, but nodded. Alexander crossed the street, his expensive suit and commanding presence immediately out of place in this neighborhood. He approached just as Jessica was about to walk away from the building, the twins' hands in hers. "Jessica." She froze at the sound of his voice, then slowly turned. Her eyes widened with recognition, followed by confusion, then wariness. "Alexander?" Her voice was exactly as he remembered, though tinged now with a caution that hadn't been there before. "What are you doing here?" The twins looked up at him curiously. They had Jessica's eyes, he realized, the same warm brown that could convey 1,000 emotions without a single word. "I saw you earlier today," he said, suddenly feeling foolish. What exactly was he doing here? "Near Fifth Avenue." Jessica's expression hardened. "Are you having me followed?" "No," he replied quickly, then amended, "Well, yes, but only after I saw you. I was concerned." She laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no humor. The great Alexander Morgan concerned about someone other than himself? That's new. The twins were still watching him, their identical faces serious now, sensing the tension between the adults. "Mommy, who is this man?" one of them asked, tugging at Jessica's hand. Jessica hesitated, then sighed. "This is an old friend of Mommy's, Mr. Morgan." "Alexander," he corrected automatically, then crouched down to the boy's level. "And what are your names?" "I'm Ethan," said the one who had spoken first. "I'm Noah," added his brother, slightly more reserved. "It's nice to meet you both," Alexander said, then straightened to face Jessica again. "Can we talk? Privately?" Jessica glanced at the laundry bag, then at her son's, conflict evident on her face. "I need to do laundry before the laundromat closes. We're running low on clean clothes." "I could help," Alexander offered, gesturing toward his car where Marcus waited. "We could give you a ride, at least." Jessica followed his gaze to the luxury vehicle and laughed again, the same empty sound. "Of course. Alexander Morgan doesn't go anywhere without his driver and his bulletproof car." "Jessica, please, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Perhaps it was the genuine plea in his voice, so unusual for a man accustomed to giving commands, or perhaps it was simple curiosity, but Jessica finally nodded. "Boys, we're going to delay laundry for a few minutes to talk to Mr. Morgan, is that okay?" The twins nodded in unison, still watching Alexander with undisguised curiosity. "There's a coffee shop around the corner," Jessica said to Alexander. "But I'm warning you, it's not the kind of place that serves artisanal espresso." Alexander ignored the jab. "Lead the way." As they walked, the twins continued to steal glances at him. There was something in their expressions, a guarded hope, perhaps, that made Alexander unexpectedly uncomfortable. What was he doing here? What did he hope to accomplish? The coffee shop was small and worn but clean, with a handful of mismatched tables. Jessica directed the twins to a corner table with coloring books and crayons that the owner kept for young customers, then ordered a simple coffee for herself. Alexander did the same, leaving a $20 bill in the tip jar that made the barista's eyes widen. They sat at a table with a view of the twins, who were now absorbed in their coloring. "They're beautiful children," Alexander said after a moment of awkward silence. "Yes, they are." Jessica's voice softened when she spoke of her sons. "They're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Alexander nodded, then asked the question that had been gnawing at him since he'd first seen them. "Their father?" Jessica's expression closed off immediately. "Not in the picture. Never has been, never will be." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? Or are you just afraid I'm going to ask you for money?" The directness that had once attracted him to Jessica now felt like a slap. "Because let me assure you, Alexander, I didn't ask for anything in our divorce, and I'm not asking for anything now." Alexander leaned back, studying her face. 5 years had added fine lines around her eyes and a certain hardness to her features, but she was still beautiful. A different kind of beauty now, one tempered by struggle and determination. "What happened, Jess? You could have taken half of everything in the divorce. You were entitled to it." Jessica wrapped her hands around her coffee cup as if drawing warmth from it. "I didn't want your money. I wanted you. But you were never really there, even when you were physically present. So you left. No discussion, no chance to fix things. We had been having the same discussion for years, Alex. You were always going to choose the company. I just finally believed you." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history between them. "And the boys?" Alexander finally asked. "They were born after—" "About a year after our divorce was finalized," Jessica confirmed. "I moved to Boston, tried to start over, met someone who seemed kind until he wasn't." She shrugged, a gesture meant to appear casual but betrayed by the tension in her shoulders. "When I found out I was pregnant, he made it clear he wasn't interested in being a father. Disappeared completely." Alexander felt an unexpected surge of anger toward this unnamed man who had abandoned Jessica and his own children. "And you've been managing on your own since then?" "We've been fine," Jessica said defensively. Alexander glanced at the twins, at their too large jackets and scuffed shoes, then back at Jessica's tired eyes and thin frame. "You don't look fine, Jess." "What do you want from me, Alexander?" she demanded, her voice low but intense. "Why are you really here? Is this some kind of ego trip for you, checking to see how far I've fallen without your support?" "No," he said quickly, genuinely startled by the suggestion. I saw you and I was concerned." "Well, now you've seen that we're managing, so you can go back to your penthouse and your perfect life with a clear conscience." Alexander stared at his untouched coffee, the weight of Jessica's words settling uncomfortably between them. He'd come here on impulse, driven by something he couldn't fully articulate, and now found himself without a plan. "The boys," he said, glancing at the twins who were still absorbed in their coloring. "Have you had them tested?" Jessica's brow furrowed. "Tested for what?" "DNA." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Why would I need to do that? I know who their father is." "I just thought—" Alexander stopped himself, suddenly aware of how his question might be interpreted. He shook his head. "Forget I said anything." "No, please continue," Jessica said, her voice cold. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Alexander leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Before you left, we had been trying for years to have a child. The fertility specialists couldn't find anything definitively wrong with either of us. Then we separate, and a year later you have twins?" Jessica's face drained of color. "You think I was unfaithful? That I was pregnant when I left you?" The timing is exactly as I told you," she snapped, pushing her chair back slightly. "I met someone in Boston. It didn't work out. End of story." Alexander held her gaze, searching for the truth. Jessica had never been a good liar, at least not with him. Her eyes would always give her away. But there was no deception there now, only anger and hurt. "I apologize," he said finally. "That was out of line." Jessica seemed to deflate slightly, the fight going out of her. "You always did have a talent for calculated cruelty, Alex." She glanced at her sons. "I should go. The laundromat closes at 9. "Let me help you," Alexander said before she could stand. "Not with the laundry, with everything. You and the boys shouldn't be living like this." Her eyes flashed. "We're managing just fine. In a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the crime rate is 3 times the city average. Working part-time at a community center that can barely pay minimum wage. That's not managing, Jessica. That's barely surviving." "How do you—" She stopped, realization dawning. "Of course. You had your people run a complete background check on me in the last few hours? That's a new record, even for you." Alexander had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I was concerned." "You were curious. There's a difference." Jessica sighed, running a hand through her ponytail. "Look, I appreciate the offer, but no, we'll be fine. You're clearly struggling." "And whose fault is that?" Jessica snapped, then immediately closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "I'm sorry, that's not fair. My situation is my responsibility. I made choices. At least let me help with the boys, their education, their future." "No!" Her voice was firm. "Ethan, Noah, time to go." The twins looked up, then began gathering their crayons with the practiced efficiency of children who had learned early to respond quickly to their mother's calls. Alexander reached across the table, his hand landing on Jessica's wrist. "Please, at least think about it." She pulled her hand away as if burned. "There's nothing to think about. We've managed for 4 years without your help, and we'll continue to do so." The twins approached the table, looking from their mother to Alexander with curious expressions. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Ethan asked, his small face serious. Alexander met Jessica's gaze before looking back at the boy. "I've known your mom for a very long time." "Are you rich?" Noah asked bluntly. "You look rich, like the men on TV." "Noah!" Jessica admonished, though her lips twitched with the ghost of a smile. Alexander chuckled. "I suppose I am. But that's not the most important thing about a person." "Mommy says that too." Ethan nodded sagely. "She says people are worth more than things." Alexander felt something twist in his chest as he looked at these small, solemn boys with their mother's eyes and her earnest expressions. "Your mother is a very wise woman." Jessica stood gathering her laundry bag. "We really need to go." Alexander rose as well, towering over the twins who looked up at him with undisguised fascination. "At least let me give you a ride." For a moment it seemed Jessica would refuse this offer too, but then Noah yawned widely, rubbing his eyes with a small fist. She sighed, relenting. "Fine. A ride to the laundromat and back." Alexander's car seemed absurdly out of place outside the small laundromat, drawing stares from passers-by. Inside, Jessica efficiently sorted clothes while the twins explored the car's luxurious interior under Marcus's patient supervision. "I don't think they've ever been in a car this nice," Jessica commented, noticing Alexander watching the boys through the window. "Jessica," he began again, his voice low, "please reconsider. Let me help you." She paused in her sorting, not looking at him. "Why? You didn't care what happened to me when I left." "That's not true." "You didn't even try to find me, Alex. Not once in 5 years." Alexander fell silent. She was right. After the initial shock and anger of her departure, he had thrown himself into his work with renewed fervor, as if trying to prove to himself and perhaps to her memory that she had been right to leave, that his company truly was his only love. "I thought it was what you wanted," he said finally. "A clean break." Jessica looked at him then, her expression unreadable. Maybe it was, but sometimes what we want isn't what we need. Before Alexander could respond, a commotion from outside drew their attention. 2 men had approached his car, peering inside with predatory interest. Marcus was on alert, one hand inside his jacket where Alexander knew he carried a gun. "Damn it," Jessica muttered, dropping the shirt she'd been folding and rushing outside. Alexander followed close behind. "Hey!" Jessica called to the men. "Step away from the car! Now!" The men turned, sizing her up with leering grins. "This your ride, sweetheart? Sugar daddy treating you right?" Alexander stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Is there a problem here?" Something in his tone, the cold authority, the implicit threat, made the men hesitate. They looked at each other, then back at the car where Marcus now stood outside, his posture clearly communicating readiness for conflict. The twins' faces were pressed against the window, their expressions a mixture of fear and fascination. "No problem," one of the men said, backing away. "Just admiring the fancy car." "Admire it from a distance," Alexander suggested, his voice pleasant but his eyes hard. The men skulked away, muttering to each other. Jessica rushed to the car, opening the door to check on the twins. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but tight with concern. The boys nodded, but Ethan's lower lip trembled slightly. "Those men were scary, Mommy." Jessica gathered him into a hug. "I know, sweetheart, but they're gone now, and you're safe." Alexander watched the interaction, a frown creasing his brow. This incident only confirmed what he already knew. Jessica and the twins were vulnerable here, living in an environment where the mere presence of a luxury car could attract potentially dangerous attention. "You can't stay here," he said, once Jessica had calmed the boys. "This neighborhood isn't safe." "This neighborhood is all I can afford right now," Jessica replied, though some of the defiance had left her voice. "And it's not usually this bad. People mostly look out for each other." "I have a proposition for you," Alexander said, making a decision. "Hear me out before you refuse." Jessica looked wary but nodded. "I own a residential building on the Upper East Side. There's a vacant 3-bedroom apartment on the 10th floor. It's yours if you want it. No rent, no strings attached." "Alexander, let me finish," he said, holding up a hand. "You and the boys would be safe. The building has security, a doorman, everything you need. The schools in the area are excellent. You could continue working at the community center if that's what you want, or I could help you find something else." Jessica's expression hardened. "I'm not looking for a handout, Alex, and I'm certainly not looking to become dependent on you." "It wouldn't be like that. Think of it as reparations for the years we spent together that I never fully invested in. The divorce settlement was fair. I signed it willingly. Fair legally, perhaps, but not morally. Not after everything." Alexander glanced at the twins, who were now listening to Marcus explain something about the car's features. "And the boys deserve better than this. You know they do." Jessica followed his gaze, her expression softening as she watched her sons. For the first time, Alexander saw the full weight of her exhaustion, the toll that years of struggling alone had taken on her. "I can't accept charity," she said finally, "especially not from you." "Then don't think of it as charity. Think of it as an investment in the boy's future." Alexander paused, considering his next words carefully. "If you're worried about strings being attached, we can formalize everything. A contract stipulating that the apartment is yours for as long as you need it, with no obligations to me." Jessica looked skeptical. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Alexander considered the question. What was driving him? Was it guilt? A desire to make amends? Or was it something else entirely? Something to do with those 2 small boys with familiar brown eyes? "Peace of mind," he answered finally, "knowing that you're all safe." Jessica turned away, watching her sons through the car window. They were laughing at something Marcus had said, their young faces alight with a joy that seemed too rare in their lives. "I need time to think about it," she said at last. "This isn't a decision I can make on impulse." "Of course." Alexander reached into his pocket and handed her a business card, not his standard corporate card, but a simpler one with just his name and personal number. "Call me when you decide. Whatever you choose, the offer stands." The laundry took nearly an hour to complete, during which Alexander remained with them despite Jessica's insistence that he didn't need to wait. The twins, initially shy, had warmed to him considerably, bombarding him with questions about his car, his watch, the tall building with his name on it that they had seen from a distance. By the time they returned to Jessica's apartment building, the boys were yawning widely, barely able to keep their eyes open. Alexander helped carry the laundry up to the 3rd-floor apartment, trying not to visibly react to the cramped, shabby conditions. The entire living space was smaller than his master bathroom, with a pull-out sofa where the twins obviously slept and a curtained-off corner that served as Jessica's bedroom. "Thank you for the ride," Jessica said stiffly at the door, clearly uncomfortable having him see how they lived. "Think about my offer," Alexander replied, unable to tear his eyes away from the water stain spreading across one ceiling corner. "Please." She nodded without committing. "Good night, Alexander." "Good night, Jessica. Boys." He crouched down to the twins' level. "It was very nice meeting you both." Ethan surprised him by stepping forward for a hug, which Alexander awkwardly returned. Noah, the more reserved of the two, gave a small wave. "Will we see you again?" Ethan asked, hope evident in his voice. Alexander looked to Jessica, whose expression remained carefully neutral. "That depends on your mom," he said diplomatically. As he rode the elevator back down to the street level, Alexander found himself shaken by the evening's events in a way he hadn't anticipated. He had expected to feel satisfied after seeing Jessica, perhaps vindicated in discovering that she was struggling without him. Instead, he felt only a profound disquiet and an unexpected sense of responsibility. "Where to, sir?" Marcus asked as Alexander settled into the car. "Home," Alexander replied, then changed his mind. "No, to the office. There's something I need to take care of." At nearly midnight, Alexander sat alone in his expansive office, reviewing the dossier Frank had compiled on Jessica's situation. The details were even more concerning than he'd initially realized. Her part-time job at the community center barely covered rent and utilities. She had outstanding medical bills from when Noah had been hospitalized with pneumonia the previous winter. Her credit cards were maxed out, and she had recently been denied a small personal loan to cover car repairs, forcing her to rely on public transportation. Alexander closed the file and leaned back in his chair, staring out at the city lights. He thought of the twins, of their two large jackets and curious eyes, of the way they'd looked at him with such open interest, without the wariness or calculation he was accustomed to seeing in those who approached him. He reached for his phone, dialing a familiar number despite the late hour. "Jensen," his lawyer answered on the third ring, sounding thoroughly awake. James Jensen never seemed to sleep, a quality Alexander had always appreciated. "James, I need you to draw up a trust fund. 2, actually, for minors." "Of course. May I ask for whom?" Alexander hesitated only briefly. "My ex-wife's children. Twin boys, 4 years old. I want them provided for, education, health care, everything. And I want it ironclad, regardless of their mother's acceptance of other assistance." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see. And the terms of disbursement?" "Standard educational trust until they're 18, then phased distributions at 21, 25, and 30. Work out the details and have the paperwork ready tomorrow. And James, this stays between us for now." Jessica sat at her tiny kitchen table long after the twins had fallen asleep, Alexander's business card between her fingers. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional drip from the leaky faucet and the soft snores of her sons from the pull-out sofa. She was exhausted, but sleep seemed impossible with her mind racing. Alexander's sudden reappearance in her life felt like a storm that had blown in without warning, upending her carefully constructed routine. For 4 years she had managed on her own, making sacrifices to provide for her boys, never allowing herself to look back or second-guess her decisions. Now, with just one chance encounter, all her certainties were thrown into question. The apartment on the Upper East Side was tempting. Too tempting. A safe neighborhood, good schools, security, everything she wanted for her sons but couldn't provide. And yet, accepting Alexander's help felt dangerously like failure, an admission that she couldn't manage on her own. "It's not about you," she whispered to herself, repeating the mantra her therapist had suggested during their limited sessions before Jessica could no longer afford them. "It's about what's best for the boys." As if on cue, Noah coughed in his sleep, a lingering remnant of the pneumonia that had nearly claimed his life the previous winter. The hospital bills had crippled them financially, forcing Jessica to take on extra shifts and sell most of her remaining valuables. Her stomach twisted at the memory of sitting by his hospital bed, terrified of losing him and equally terrified of the mounting costs of saving him. Alexander's resources could ensure the boys never went without medical care again. They could have their own bedroom, clothes that fit properly, toys that weren't salvaged from thrift stores or charity bins. They could attend schools that nurtured their obvious intelligence instead of overcrowded classrooms where teachers were too overwhelmed to provide individual attention. But accepting his help would mean allowing him back into their lives. Alexander Morgan didn't do anything halfway. She knew that better than anyone. He would insert himself, perhaps gradually at first, but with increasing authority. His wealth and power had always given him a sense of entitlement that extended to the people in his orbit. Jessica glanced at the water stains spreading across the ceiling, which had grown noticeably larger after the recent rainstorm. The landlord had promised to fix it months ago. just as he'd promised to address the faulty wiring and the temperamental heating system. But promises meant little in a building where most tenants couldn't afford to move and had no leverage to demand repairs. Her phone chimed with a text message. It was from her boss at the community center. Budget cuts confirmed. All part-time positions being eliminated. So sorry, Jessica. Last day will be Friday. Jessica stared at the message, a cold numbness spreading through her. The community center job had been her primary income, meager as it was. Without it, they wouldn't make next month's rent, let alone cover utilities and food. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down. The universe, it seemed, had made the decision for her. She picked up Alexander's card again, running her thumb over the embossed letters of his name. Then, before she could reconsider, she dialed the number. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. "Jessica?" "The apartment," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll take it, but I have conditions." There was a pause, and she could almost see him sitting up straighter, shifting into negotiation mode. "I'm listening. This is temporary, just until I find a better job and get back on my feet. 1 year, maximum." "That seems arbitrary, but continue." Jessica ignored his comment. "I'll handle all our daily expenses, food, clothing, everything. I don't want your money, just the apartment." "Jessica, I'm serious, Alexander. I need to maintain my independence. I won't become dependent on you." There was a sigh on the other end. "Fine, the apartment only, for now." "And one more thing," Jessica added, her voice softening slightly. "I don't want the boys to get too attached to you. They've had enough disappointment in their lives." The silence that followed was heavy. "Is that how you see me, Jess? As someone who would disappoint them?" "It's how I know you," she replied simply. "Your work always comes first. It always has." Another pause. People change. Do they? Jessica wasn't convinced, but this wasn't the time for that debate. "In any case, those are my terms. Take them or leave them." "I accept your terms," Alexander said, though she could hear the reluctance in his voice. "When would you like to see the apartment?" "As soon as possible. I just received notice that my position at the community center is being eliminated at the end of the week." "I'm sorry to hear that." His voice seemed genuinely sympathetic. "I can arrange for movers if you'd like." Jessica looked around at their meager possessions, the second-hand furniture, the few photo frames, the toys she'd managed to collect for the boys over the years. "That won't be necessary. We don't have much." "Then I'll text you the address. The doorman will be expecting you tomorrow afternoon. The apartment is fully furnished, but if there's anything you need changed—" "I'm sure it will be fine," Jessica interrupted, already uncomfortable with the generosity. "Thank you, Alexander." "You're welcome, Jessica." There was a pause. "And Jessica, I won't disappoint them. You have my word." After they hung up, Jessica sat motionless at the table, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake or the wisest decision of her life. The next morning, she sat the twins down to explain the changes coming to their lives. "We're moving to a new apartment," she told them as they ate their cereal. "A nicer one, in a safer neighborhood." Ethan's eyes widened. "Today?" "Yes, sweetheart. Today." "But what about school?" Noah asked pragmatically. "And our friends?" Jessica had considered this. Their current preschool was within walking distance, but the quality was questionable at best. "You'll go to a new school with more activities and resources, and you'll make new friends." The boys exchanged glances, having one of those silent twin communications that Jessica found both fascinating and slightly unnerving. "Is it because of the rich man?" Ethan finally asked. "The one with the fancy car?" Jessica hesitated, unsure how much to explain. "Mr. Morgan is helping us with the apartment, yes. He's an old friend of Mommy's." "Is he going to live with us?" Noah's question was so unexpected that Jessica nearly choked on her coffee. "No, absolutely not. Mr. Morgan has his own home. He's just helping us find a better place to live." "Why?" Noah persisted, always the more inquisitive of the two. Jessica considered her answer carefully. Sometimes when people have more than they need, they share with others. That's what Mr. Morgan is doing. This seemed to satisfy the twins, who returned to their cereal. Jessica watched them, marveling at their resilience. In their short lives, they had already adapted to so many changes. The move from Boston after their father disappeared, the various apartments as Jessica's financial situation deteriorated, the shifting schedule of caregivers as she juggled multiple jobs. Through it all, they had remained remarkably good-natured and adaptable. Alexander's text arrived as she was packing the few dishes they owned. The address was in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Manhattan, and he had included a code for the doorman and a set of digital keys that could be accessed through her phone. There was also a note: "Car service will arrive at noon. The apartment is ready whenever you are." Jessica had expected to feel overwhelmed by the splendor of Alexander's building when they arrived, but she hadn't anticipated the twins' reaction. Their eyes grew impossibly wide as they entered the marble lobby with its crystal chandelier and uniformed doorman. "Wow," Ethan breathed, turning in a small circle to take it all in. "Is this a palace?" The doorman, an older gentleman with a kind smile, chuckled. "Not quite, young man, but close enough. You must be the Whitman family. Mr. Morgan informed us you'd be arriving today." He escorted them to a private elevator that required a key card to access. "The 10th floor is exclusive to your apartment, Mrs. Whitman. Mr. Morgan had it renovated recently." Jessica bit back a comment about not being Mrs. anything, and certainly not Mrs. Whitman, but she didn't want to confuse the twins with explanations about her complicated history with Alexander. Instead, she simply nodded and guided the boys into the elevator. The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, flooding the space with natural light. The open-concept living area featured tasteful, comfortable furniture that managed to be both luxurious and practical. A spacious kitchen gleamed with high-end appliances, and the dining table could easily seat 8. "Look, Mommy!" Noah called, having already discovered the hallway leading to the bedrooms. "There's a room with rocket ships on the wall." Jessica followed, finding a bedroom that had clearly been designed with young boys in mind. 2 twin beds with space-themed bedding sat against opposite walls, with a shared bookshelf between them filled with age-appropriate books. A toy chest near the window was already stocked with building blocks, action figures, and art supplies. "And this one has dinosaurs," Ethan exclaimed from across the hall, where a second children's bedroom was decorated in a prehistoric theme. Jessica stood in the hallway momentarily overwhelmed. Alexander hadn't just offered them a place to stay, he had created a home specifically designed for her children, with attention to details she hadn't even mentioned. "Do you like it?" Alexander's voice startled her. He stood at the entrance to the hallway, his expression a mixture of uncertainty and hope. "When did you have time to do all this?" Jessica asked, gesturing to the themed bedrooms. Alexander shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "I made some calls last night after we spoke. I have a design team that handles my properties. They worked through the night." "This is too much, Alexander." "It's not enough," he countered, his voice soft enough that the twins, still exploring their new surroundings, couldn't hear. "Not after everything." Before Jessica could respond, the twins noticed Alexander's presence and came running. "Mr. Morgan, did you make these rooms for us?" Ethan asked, practically bouncing with excitement. Alexander crouched down to their level, a gesture that surprised Jessica. The Alexander she remembered had always been somewhat awkward around children. "I did. Do you like them?" "They're awesome," Ethan exclaimed. "But which one is mine?" "That's for you and your brother to decide," Alexander replied with a smile. "I want the rocket ship room," Noah declared immediately. "Then I get dinosaurs." Ethan seemed equally pleased with this arrangement. Alexander glanced up at Jessica, seeking her approval. She gave a small nod, still processing the surreal nature of their situation. "There's a 3rd bedroom for your mom," Alexander told the boys, standing up. and a study that can be used as a playroom or homework space as you get older. Can we see? The twins were already moving down the hallway, eager to explore every corner of their new home. Left momentarily alone with Alexander, Jessica found her voice. "You didn't have to go to such lengths. A basic apartment would have been more than enough. I wanted them to feel at home," Alexander said simply. "And I wanted you to know that this isn't just charity or guilt. I genuinely want to help." Jessica studied his face, searching for the ulterior motive she was certain must exist. Alexander Morgan didn't do anything without calculating the benefits to himself. But his expression was open, almost vulnerable, a look she had rarely seen during their marriage. "Thank you," she said finally. "The boys are clearly thrilled." "And you?" Alexander asked, his gaze intense. "What do you think?" Jessica glanced around at the beautiful apartment, so far removed from the cramped, dilapidated space they had left behind. "I think it's going to take some getting used to." A shadow of disappointment crossed Alexander's face, but he nodded. "Of course. It's a big change." The twins came racing back, full of questions about the television that descended from the ceiling in the master bedroom and the bathtub with super-cool bubble jets. "Can Mr. Morgan stay for dinner?" Ethan asked, looking hopefully between the adults. "We could order pizza." Jessica hesitated, torn between wanting to establish boundaries immediately and not wanting to dampen the boys' excitement. "I'm sure Mr. Morgan is very busy. Actually, I'm free this evening," Alexander interjected smoothly. "And pizza sounds excellent, but only if your mom is comfortable with it." 3 pairs of eyes turned to Jessica, the twins pleading, Alexander's carefully neutral. She sighed, recognizing defeat. "Fine, pizza it is." The twins cheered, and Alexander's face broke into a genuine smile that momentarily transported Jessica back to the early days of their relationship, before his company had consumed him, when his smiles had been frequent and unguarded. As the boys dragged Alexander off to show him something else they had discovered, Jessica remained in the hallway, a complicated mix of emotions washing over her. Gratitude for the beautiful space that would give her sons a chance at a better life. Wariness about Alexander's true intentions. And beneath it all, a nagging worry about the growing connection between her ex-husband and her sons. The twins had never had a consistent male figure in their lives. Jessica had dated occasionally in Boston, but never seriously, and certainly never anyone she had introduced to the boys. Alexander, with his commanding presence and obvious wealth, represented everything a 4-year-old might imagine in a heroic figure. They were already looking at him with admiration bordering on awe. And yet Jessica couldn't help but notice something else. The way Alexander looked at the twins when he thought no one was watching. There was curiosity there, and something deeper, more assessing. She recognized that look. It was the same one he wore when evaluating a potential acquisition, searching for hidden value or unexpected liabilities. Jessica shivered slightly despite the comfortable temperature of the apartment. Alexander's earlier question about DNA tests still bothered her. What exactly did he suspect? And more importantly, what was he planning to do about it? Pizza night stretched into a surprisingly enjoyable evening. Despite Jessica's initial reservations, she found herself relaxing as the twins regaled Alexander with animated stories about their preschool adventures and favorite cartoon characters. Alexander, for his part, listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at all the right moments. It was a side of him Jessica had rarely seen during their marriage. This patient, attentive man who seemed perfectly content to spend his evening discussing the merits of different dinosaurs with her 4-year-olds instead of negotiating million-dollar deals or strategizing corporate takeovers. After dinner, Alexander helped the twins arrange their new bedroom, carefully placing their few treasured possessions, a collection of smooth stones Noah had gathered from a park, Ethan's battered toy robot, the framed photo of the 3 of them at Boston Harbor, around the room to make it feel more familiar. "Mr. Morgan, do you have kids?" Noah asked as Alexander helped him organize his stones on a small shelf. Alexander's hands stilled momentarily. "No, I don't." "Why not?" Noah persisted with a child's directness. "Don't you like kids?" "Noah," Jessica admonished gently from the doorway. "That's a personal question." Alexander shook his head. "It's all right." He turned back to Noah. "I do like kids. I just never had the chance to have any of my own." "Why not?" Ethan joined the conversation, abandoning his toy arrangement to move closer. "Didn't you want to be a daddy?" A shadow crossed Alexander's face, so brief Jessica almost missed it. "Sometimes things don't work out the way we plan," he said finally. "Your mom and we tried to have children when we were married, but it didn't happen for us." The casual revelation stunned Jessica. During their marriage, Alexander had insisted their fertility struggles remain private, refused to discuss their disappointments with anyone, even close friends. Now he was sharing this intimate detail with her 4-year-old sons without hesitation. "You were married to our mommy?" Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. "A long time ago," Alexander confirmed, his gaze flickering to Jessica as if seeking permission to continue. She gave a slight nod, curious to see how he would explain their history. "Before you were born," Alexander continued, "your mom and I were married for almost 10 years, but I was very busy with my work and I didn't spend enough time with her, so eventually she decided she didn't want to be married to me anymore." The twins absorbed this information with serious expressions. "Were you sad?" Noah asked softly. Alexander's answer was immediate and honest. "Yes, I was very sad." "Did you cry?" Ethan wanted to know. This time Alexander hesitated, a flush of embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "I did, actually. Just once." Jessica stared at him, this admission perhaps the most surprising of all. She had never seen Alexander cry. Not when they lost their first pregnancy at 11 weeks, not during any of their subsequent failures, not even when she left. He had always maintained rigid control over his emotions, a trait he claimed was necessary for success in business, but one that had created an unbridgeable distance between them. "All right, boys," Jessica interjected, feeling suddenly protective of Alexander's unexpected vulnerability. "It's getting late, and you've had an exciting day. Time to get ready for bed." The twins protested half-heartedly, but their frequent yawns betrayed their exhaustion. Alexander stood up, brushing invisible dust from his knees. "Your mom's right. Growing boys need their sleep." He smiled at them. "Maybe I can visit again soon if that's okay with your mom." The boys turned pleading eyes to Jessica. "Can he, Mommy? Please?" Jessica hesitated, torn between maintaining the boundaries she had planned to establish and the obvious joy Alexander's presence had brought her sons. "We'll see," she compromised. "Mr. Morgan is a very busy man." "Not too busy for this," Alexander said quietly, his gaze holding hers for a moment before he turned back to the twins. "Good night, boys. Thank you for letting me share your first evening in your new home." After the twins were finally settled in their beds, a process extended by their excitement over the new rooms and their desire to catalog every fascinating feature before sleep, Jessica found Alexander waiting in the living room, a glass of water in his hand as he stared out at the city lights. "They're remarkable children," he said without turning around. "You've done an amazing job with them, Jess." "Thank you." She moved to stand beside him, maintaining a careful distance. "They seem to really connect with you tonight." Alexander nodded, still looking out at the view. "They're starved for male attention. It's natural." "I suppose so." Jessica studied his profile, the strong jaw, the slight crease between his brows that had deepened since their marriage. "You were good with them, patient. That's not something I remember from before. Like I said, people change." He turned to face her. Or maybe they just revealed different aspects of themselves under different circumstances. Jessica wasn't sure how to respond to that. The Alexander she had known had been driven, ambitious, often impatient with anything, or anyone, that didn't directly contribute to his goals. The man who had spent the evening listening to her sons chatter about animated movies and helping them arrange their belongings seemed like a stranger. "I should go," Alexander said after a moment of silence. "You must be exhausted." "It's been a long day," Jessica agreed, walking him to the door. She hesitated, then added, "Thank you again for the apartment, and for being so kind to the boys." Alexander paused in the doorway. "I meant what I said to Noah. I always wanted children, Jess. The timing just wasn't right for us." There was something in his tone, a subtle emphasis on us, that made Jessica uneasy. Before she could respond, he continued, "Would you and the boys join me for dinner on Friday? I know a place with excellent food that also happens to have a small play area for children." Jessica's immediate instinct was to refuse, to maintain the distance she had promised herself she would keep. But the memory of the twins' excited faces as they showed Alexander their new rooms gave her pause. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "No promises." Alexander nodded, accepting her hesitation. "Good night, Jessica." After he left, Jessica sank onto the luxurious sofa, feeling the full weight of the day's events. The apartment was beautiful, peaceful in a way her previous living situations hadn't been for years. Through the partially open doors of the bedrooms, she could see her sons sleeping soundly, their small faces relaxed in slumber. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Jessica allowed herself to acknowledge the bone-deep exhaustion that had become her constant companion. The relentless struggle to provide for the twins, the constant worry about money, the fear that one serious illness or unexpected expense would be the final blow that toppled their precarious existence, it had all taken a toll. Here, in this elegant apartment with its security and comfort, she felt a measure of that burden lifting. But in its place was a new concern: Alexander's growing interest in the twins and his persistent questions about their parentage. The next morning, Jessica woke to sunlight streaming through windows far larger and cleaner than she was accustomed to. For a moment she was disoriented, her mind struggling to reconcile the luxurious surroundings with her memories of the cramped apartment they had left behind. The twins, however, had adapted seamlessly. They came bounding into her room earlier than usual, already fully awake and buzzing with excitement about their new home. "Mommy, the refrigerator talks," Ethan announced, climbing onto her bed. "It told me good morning." "And the bathroom mirror shows the time," Noah added, his eyes wide with wonder. "Can we stay here forever?" Jessica pulled them close, breathing in their familiar scent, a grounding constant amid all the changes. "We'll see, sweetheart. For now, let's just enjoy it day by day." After breakfast, prepared in a kitchen that contained more advanced technology than Jessica knew how to operate, she sat the boys down for a more serious conversation. "Today we need to register you at your new school," she explained. "Mr. Morgan has arranged for you to attend Westside Academy. It's supposed to be one of the best preschools in the city." The twins exchanged glances. "Will our friends be there?" Noah asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "No, honey. You'll need to make new friends, but I'm sure there will be lots of nice children there." Jessica tried to sound more confident than she felt. Westside Academy catered to the children of New York's elite, exactly the type of privileged upbringing she had consciously rejected after leaving Alexander. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Alexander. "Car waiting downstairs whenever you're ready. School administrator expecting you at 10. All enrollment paperwork handled." Jessica frowned at the message. She had planned to take the subway to the school to maintain some semblance of her usual independence. Alexander's presumption irritated her, even as a small part of her was relieved at the convenience. "Is that Mr. Morgan?" Ethan asked, noticing her expression. "Is he coming to see us again?" "No, honey. He's just helping us with some arrangements for school." Jessica tucked the phone into her pocket. "Now, let's get dressed and ready to go." The car waiting downstairs was not the ostentatious Maybach from the previous day, but a more discreet luxury SUV with tinted windows. Marcus was at the wheel, his expression as impassive as ever. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitman," he greeted her, deliberately ignoring her wince at the incorrect title. "Mr. Morgan asked me to ensure you arrive safely at Westside Academy." Jessica hesitated, still reluctant to accept this level of assistance, but the twins were already climbing excitedly into the vehicle, marveling at the spacious interior and the small screens built into the back of the front seats. "This is just for today," she told Marcus firmly as she settled into her seat. "I'm perfectly capable of managing our transportation going forward." Marcus nodded, though the slight quirk of his lips suggested skepticism. "Of course, ma'am. Whatever you prefer." Westside Academy was housed in a stately brick building surrounded by meticulously landscaped grounds. The interior was equally impressive: bright classrooms filled with educational materials, a state-of-the-art gymnasium, even a small greenhouse where children could learn about plants and sustainability. The school administrator, a polished woman in her 50s, greeted them warmly. "Mrs. Whitman, we're delighted to welcome Ethan and Noah to Westside. Mr. Morgan speaks very highly of the boys." Jessica bit back a correction about both her marital status and Alexander's limited knowledge of her sons. Instead, she simply smiled and thanked the administrator for accommodating them on such short notice. "Not at all. We always have places for exceptional children." The woman bent slightly to address the twins. "Would you boys like to see your classroom and meet your new teacher?" The twins, suddenly shy in the unfamiliar environment, looked to Jessica for reassurance. "It's okay," she encouraged them. "I'll be right with you." The classroom was bright and inviting, with various activity stations and a small reading nook filled with cushions. The teacher, a young woman with a warm smile, immediately engaged the twins in conversation about their interests, drawing them out of their shells with practiced ease. While the boys were distracted, the administrator drew Jessica aside. "There's just one matter to address," she said in a lowered voice. "The enrollment forms list only your information, with no father indicated." Jessica stiffened. "That's correct. I'm a single mother." "Of course, and that's absolutely fine. Many of our students come from diverse family structures." The administrator's smile remained professionally fixed. "However, for emergency contact purposes and legal guardianship records, we typically require information about both biological parents, even in cases of sole custody." "Their father isn't in the picture," Jessica said firmly. "He has never been involved in their lives and doesn't have any legal rights. I have full custody." The administrator nodded, though she looked slightly uncomfortable. "I understand. It's just that Mr. Morgan mentioned he would be involved in the boys' education going forward, so I assumed—" Jessica's heart skipped a beat. "You assumed what, exactly?" "Well, given his interest in their enrollment and his history with you, I thought perhaps he might be—" The administrator trailed off, seeming to realize she had ventured into sensitive territory. "Alexander Morgan is my former husband," Jessica stated clearly. "He is not the twins' father. He's simply a family friend who is helping us temporarily." "Of course, I apologize for the confusion." The administrator made a note in her file. "The boys can start tomorrow if that works for you. All the necessary forms have been processed and the tuition has been arranged through Mr. Morgan's office." Jessica nodded stiffly, fighting a growing sense of unease. What exactly had Alexander told the school about his relationship to the twins? And why was he so intent on involving himself in their education? As they left the school, the twins chattering excitedly about their new classroom and the playground they had glimpsed through the windows, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing control of the narrative, that Alexander was subtly positioning himself in a role she hadn't agreed to. "Marcus," she said as they settled back into the car, "please take us to Morgan Enterprises. I need to speak with Alexander. Morgan Enterprises occupied the top 15 floors of a gleaming skyscraper that dominated the Manhattan skyline. Jessica had visited the building countless times during her marriage to Alexander, but never with twin 4-year-olds in tow. As they entered the vast marble lobby, her stomach knotted with anxiety. "Mommy, is this where Mr. Morgan works?" Ethan asked, his head tilted back to stare at the soaring ceiling. "Yes, sweetheart. He's the boss here." Jessica tightened her grip on the twins' hands as they approached the security desk. The guard did a double take when Jessica gave her name. "Mrs. Morgan? Ms. Whitman?" His eyes flicked to the twins, curiosity evident. "I need to see Alexander." "It's important." Jessica kept her tone firm, professional, though she was acutely aware of how out of place they looked. She in her simple blouse and jeans, the twins in their well-worn sneakers and jackets. The guard made a quick call, then directed them to a private elevator that would take them directly to the executive floor. As they rode up, Jessica tried to formulate exactly what she wanted to say to Alexander. Her anger had cooled somewhat during the ride from the school, giving way to a more rational assessment of the situation. But she was still determined to establish clear boundaries. The elevator opened directly into a reception area where a sleek, professionally dressed woman sat behind a desk. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Jessica and the twins, though she recovered quickly. "Ms. Whitman, this is unexpected. Mr. Morgan is in a meeting, but I'll let him know you're here." Her gaze lingered on the twins. "And these must be—" "My sons," Jessica supplied, deliberately not offering their names. "How long will his meeting take?" "It's the quarterly board presentation. Normally these run several hours, but—" The door to Alexander's office opened, and the man himself emerged, accompanied by several individuals in expensive suits. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Jessica and the twins, genuine surprise crossing his features before his expression settled into something more controlled. "Jessica, boys, this is unexpected." He gestured to the group of executives. "We'll continue after lunch. Please review the projections for the Asian market expansion in the meantime." The executives nodded, though Jessica could see the curiosity in their eyes as they filed past, several of them nodding politely in her direction. "Alexander," Jessica began once they were alone, save for the receptionist, "we need to talk." "Of course." He looked to his assistant. "Clara, please hold my calls. And perhaps you could show Ethan and Noah the break room. I believe there are cookies and some child-friendly drinks in the refrigerator." Clara nodded, rising from her desk. "Would you like to see where Mr. Morgan's employees have their snacks?" she asked the twins with a warm smile. Noah looked to Jessica for permission. "Can we, Mommy?" Jessica hesitated, reluctant to be separated from the boys but also not wanting them to witness what might become a heated conversation. "All right, but stay with Ms. Clara and behave yourselves." After the twins had followed Clara down the hallway, Alexander gestured Jessica into his office. The space was exactly as she remembered it. Expansive, meticulously designed, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The furniture had been updated, but the essential character remained unchanged. A command center for a man who controlled vast resources and was accustomed to wielding power. "What brings you here?" Alexander asked, closing the door behind them. "Is something wrong with the apartment?" "The apartment is fine," Jessica replied, remaining standing even as he gestured to the seating area. "It's your involvement with the twins that concerns me." Alexander's expression didn't change, but she noticed a slight tension in his shoulders. "I'm not sure I understand." "The school administrator thought you might be their father," Jessica said directly. "She implied that you had presented yourself as someone who would be actively involved in their education. That goes well beyond providing an apartment, Alexander." He moved to the window, his back to her for a moment before turning. "I simply made arrangements for their enrollment and took care of the financial aspects. I never claimed to be their father." "But you didn't correct the assumption, did you?" Jessica crossed her arms. You're inserting yourself into their lives in ways we didn't agree to. I'm trying to help, Jessica. Westside Academy is one of the best schools in the city. The education they'll receive there will open doors for them in the future. That should be my decision as their mother, not yours. Alexander's expression hardened. Would you have been able to afford that level of education on your own? Or would they have ended up in an overcrowded public school with outdated resources and overworked teachers? The truth of his words stung, but Jessica stood her ground. That's not the point. The point is that you're overstepping. This arrangement was supposed to be about the apartment, nothing more. And what's so wrong about wanting to provide more? About wanting to ensure they have every advantage in life? Alexander's voice rose slightly, a rare crack in his usual composed demeanor. Because it's not your responsibility, Jessica snapped, her own frustration boiling over. They're not your children, Alexander. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Alexander's jaw tightened, and something flickered in his eyes, a brief flash of emotion too complex to decipher. Are you absolutely certain of that, Jessica? The question, delivered in a dangerously soft voice, stopped her cold. What are you suggesting? Alexander moved closer, his gaze never leaving hers. The twins are 4 years old. They were born approximately 1 year after our divorce. We had been trying to conceive for years, without success. I've already explained this, Jessica interrupted, her heart pounding. I met someone in Boston after we separated. He's their biological father. So you've said. Alexander's tone made it clear he wasn't convinced. Yet I find the timing curious. There's nothing curious about it. These things happen, Alexander. Our fertility issues were likely more about stress and timing than any physical problem. God knows our marriage was stressful enough toward the end. Perhaps. Alexander studied her face, his eyes searching for something. And yet, looking at them, their eyes, the shape of their faces, I can't help but wonder. Jessica felt a flutter of panic. They look like me. They do, he agreed. But there are other features, subtle resemblances that remind me of my own family. That's absurd. Jessica turned away, unable to maintain eye contact. You're seeing what you want to see. Am I? Alexander moved to his desk, opening a drawer to extract a manila folder. I had an interesting conversation with Dr. Levine last week. Jessica froze. Dr. Levine had been their fertility specialist during the last year of their marriage. You had no right to discuss our medical history. He was quite discreet, I assure you. But he did confirm something I had suspected. Alexander opened the folder, scanning its contents. Our last viable embryo extraction, 3 months before you left. The procedure was successful, resulting in several high-quality embryos that were frozen for future IVF attempts. What of it? Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. According to the clinic's records, those embryos were released to you 6 weeks after our separation, at your request. Alexander looked up from the folder, his expression unreadable. What happened to them, Jessica? Jessica felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. She had never expected this confrontation, had convinced herself that Alexander would never discover the truth, or at least would never care enough to investigate. I had them destroyed, she lied, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. I didn't want any lasting connection to our marriage. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Then you won't object to a DNA test? Absolutely not. Jessica's vehemence surprised even herself. I won't subject my children to medical procedures just to satisfy your curiosity. It's a simple cheek swab, Jessica. Painless and quick. Alexander's voice was reasonable, persuasive, the same tone he used in negotiations when he knew he had the upper hand. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize and never mention it again, but if I'm right— You're not right, Jessica insisted, though her voice trembled slightly. And even if you were, and I'm not saying you are, it wouldn't change anything. I'm their mother. I've raised them alone since birth. They're mine. They could be ours, Alexander said, so softly she almost didn't hear him. "Our sons, Jessica. The children we tried so hard to conceive." Jessica felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. "Stop it. Just stop." "Why did you come back to New York?" Alexander pressed, changing tactics. "Of all the cities in the country, why return to the one place where you might run into me?" "It wasn't intentional. I had a job opportunity and at a community center paying barely above minimum wage. There must have been similar positions in Boston, closer to your support network." Jessica had no answer. The truth was too complicated, too revealing. "I think you wanted me to find out," Alexander continued, his voice gentler now. "Subconsciously, perhaps. You were struggling, the boys needed more than you could provide alone, and some part of you knew I would help if I discovered the truth." "That's ridiculous," Jessica protested, but her words lacked conviction even to her own ears. Alexander set the folder down and moved toward her, stopping just within arm's reach. "Tell me the truth, Jessica. Are they mine? Are the twins my biological sons?" Jessica felt cornered, trapped between the truth she had hidden for years and the lie she had constructed to protect herself and the twins from Alexander's consuming focus. Before she could respond, a commotion outside the office door broke the tension. The door burst open, and Ethan came running in, clutching a chocolate chip cookie in one hand and a juice box in the other. "Mommy, they have the biggest cookies ever, and Mr. Morgan's office has a special room just for toys and games." Noah followed more sedately, accompanied by Clara, who wore an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan. They were quite insistent about returning to show you the cookies." Alexander's demeanor transformed instantly, the intensity of moments earlier replaced by a warm smile as he crouched down to the twins' level. "Those do look like excellent cookies. Did you thank Ms. Clara for showing you where they were?" "Yes," Ethan nodded vigorously. "She's super nice. She showed us pictures of her dog, too." Jessica watched the interaction, her mind racing. The ease with which Alexander shifted from intimidating corporate titan to gentle father figure was disconcerting. Even more troubling was how natural he looked with the twins, how readily they responded to him. "I'm afraid we need to go," Jessica announced abruptly. "Thank you for making time to see us, Alexander." Alexander straightened, his expression carefully neutral again. "Of course. We'll continue our discussion another time." "Aw, do we have to go?" Noah protested. "Ms. Clara said she could show us the helicopter landing pad on the roof." "Another day, perhaps," Alexander suggested, looking to Jessica for confirmation. "If your mother agrees." Jessica avoided his gaze. "We'll see. Say goodbye to Mr. Morgan, boys." The twins offered enthusiastic goodbyes, complete with sticky-fingered hugs that left chocolate smudges on Alexander's immaculate suit, marks he didn't seem to mind in the slightest. As they walked toward the elevator, Jessica could feel Alexander's eyes following them, his questions still hanging unanswered in the air between them. During the ride down to the lobby, Jessica's mind whirled with panicked thoughts. Alexander was too close to the truth. The careful story she had constructed was unraveling, and she had no idea how to repair it without further lies that might eventually be exposed. "Mommy, can we come back tomorrow?" Ethan asked as they exited the building. "Mr. Morgan's office is amazing." "Not tomorrow, sweetheart," Jessica replied automatically, her thoughts still upstairs with Alexander and the damning folder on his desk. "But soon," Noah pressed, his expression hopeful. Jessica couldn't bring herself to crush that hope, not when both boys had already experienced too much disappointment in their young lives. "Maybe. We'll see." As Marcus drove them back to the apartment, Jessica stared out the window at the city passing by, hardly seeing it. The confrontation with Alexander had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. She had always known this day might come, that the truth might eventually surface, but she had hoped for more time, for the twins to be older, more established in their sense of identity. Now, with Alexander's suspicions confirmed and his resources at his disposal, It seemed inevitable that the careful life she had constructed would soon change irrevocably. The question was no longer if the truth would come out, but when and what the consequences would be for all of them, especially the twins who remained blissfully unaware of the adults' complications. Jessica couldn't sleep that night. She paced the expansive living room of the apartment, periodically checking on the twins who slumbered peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing around them. The confrontation with Alexander played on repeat in her mind, his accusations and her evasions, the damning evidence he had collected. She should leave, she thought. Pack what little they owned and disappear before Alexander could pursue the matter further. But where would they go? She had no money, no job prospects, and the twins had just started at their new school. Running now would only create more instability in their lives, something she had sworn to avoid. Jessica sank onto the sofa, her head in her hands. The truth was a burden she had carried alone for years, a secret woven from desperation, fear, and perhaps a misguided sense of ownership. Now, with Alexander so close to unraveling it all, she found herself questioning her own justifications. Had he been right? Had some subconscious part of her wanted him to discover the twins, to shoulder some of the enormous responsibility she had borne alone? The thought was disturbing, suggesting a level of manipulation she didn't want to acknowledge in herself. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Alexander, we need to finish our conversation. Dinner tomorrow? I'll have Marcus pick you up at 7. Clara can watch the boys at your apartment." Jessica stared at the message. It wasn't a request, but an expectation. Classic Alexander, assuming compliance rather than asking for it. Her first instinct was to refuse, to dig in her heels against his presumption. But the reality of their situation demanded resolution. The confrontation couldn't be postponed indefinitely. She typed her response carefully. "I'll arrange my own childcare, and I'll meet you at the restaurant. Send me the address." His reply came seconds later. "As you wish. Le Bernardin at 7:30. I've made reservations." Jessica set the phone down, anxiety gnawing at her stomach. Le Bernardin was one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, a place they had frequented during their marriage. Alexander was deliberately choosing familiar ground, perhaps hoping to evoke memories of their shared past. The next evening, after arranging for the twins' regular babysitter from their old neighborhood to come to the new apartment, at a fee that made Jessica wince though she refused to accept Alexander's offer of Clara's free services, Jessica dressed with care. She chose a simple black dress, one of the few nice pieces she had kept from her previous life, and minimal jewelry. Her goal was to appear composed and confident, even as anxiety churned within her. Le Bernardin was exactly as she remembered it: elegant, understated luxury with impeccable service. The maitre d' recognized her immediately, his professional mask slipping momentarily to reveal surprise. "Mrs. Morgan, it's been years. We've missed you and Mr. Morgan. Your usual table is ready." Jessica didn't bother correcting him. "Thank you, Philippe. Is he here yet?" "Yes, just arrived moments ago." Alexander rose as she approached the table, his expression unreadable. He was dressed in one of his custom suits, a subtle display of wealth and power that reminded Jessica of the vast gulf between their current lives. They had once been a matched pair, moving effortlessly through this world of privilege together. Now she felt like an imposter, a visitor from another reality. "You look beautiful," Alexander said as she took her seat, the compliment offered with what seemed like genuine appreciation rather than mere politeness. "Thank you." Jessica accepted the menu from the server, though she knew Alexander would have already ordered for both of them, remembering her preferences even after years apart. Sure enough, the sommelier appeared with a bottle of the Puligny Montrachet she had always favored. "I took the liberty," Alexander confirmed as the wine was poured. "I remember how much you enjoyed this vintage." Jessica took a sip, allowing herself a moment to appreciate the complex flavors before setting the glass down. "Alexander, let's not pretend this is a social dinner. You wanted to talk, so talk. He leaned back slightly, studying her face. Direct as ever. It's one of the things I've always admired about you. Alexander, very well. He placed his hands flat on the table, a gesture she recognized as his way of organizing his thoughts before a difficult conversation. After you left yesterday, I contacted a private laboratory. They can perform a DNA test with minimal intrusion. A hair sample would be sufficient. No need for the cheek swab I mentioned. Jessica set her wineglass down with more force than intended. I already told you I will not subject the twins to testing to satisfy your curiosity. It wouldn't be their DNA being tested, Alexander clarified. Just yours and mine, compared against samples I've already secured from the boys. Jessica stared at him, momentarily speechless. You took their DNA without my permission? That's a violation, Alexander. It's unethical, possibly illegal. A strand of hair from each of their jackets is hardly a violation, Jessica. His tone remained calm, reasonable. And as their potential biological father, I have rights that supersede concerns about technical legalities. Potential being the operative word, Jessica snapped, though she kept her voice low, aware of the other diners. You have no proof. That's the purpose of the test. Alexander sipped his wine, his gaze never leaving her face. But I think we both know what the results will show, don't we? Jessica felt cornered, trapped by the inexorable logic of his argument and the evidence he had assembled. The server appeared with their appetizers, providing a brief respite from the tension. Once they were alone again, she tried a different approach. Even if, and I'm not admitting anything, but even if your suspicions were correct, what exactly are you hoping to gain? The twins are 4 years old. They've never known any father. Suddenly inserting yourself into their lives would only confuse them. I've already inserted myself into their lives, Alexander pointed out, and they seem quite receptive to my presence. Children are adaptable, especially at their age. And what about your life? Jessica challenged. You're a corporate titan with a global empire to run. When would you find time to be a father between board meetings and international flights? You barely had time for me when we were married. What makes you think you could make time for 2 active boys who need consistency, not occasional appearances when your schedule permits? Alexander's expression hardened. People change, Jessica. I've changed. The company runs itself now in many ways. I've built a strong executive team specifically to allow myself more personal freedom. For your girlfriend, you mean? Sophia, isn't it? The gallery owner? How does she feel about the possibility of instant fatherhood? A flicker of surprise crossed Alexander's face. You've been keeping tabs on me? Jessica shrugged, avoiding his gaze. It's hard to avoid news about one of New York's most eligible bachelors. Page 6 seems quite invested in your love life. Sophia and I ended things several weeks ago before I saw you on the street that day. Alexander dismissed the topic with a wave of his hand. But that's irrelevant to our discussion. This is about the twins, about our sons. They're my sons, Jessica insisted, her voice carrying a trace of desperation now. I carried them. I gave birth to them. I've raised them alone for 4 years. Because you chose to, Alexander countered, leaning forward. You made that decision unilaterally, Jessica. You denied me the knowledge that I had children, denied me the chance to be their father from the beginning. And if I did? Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. If I used our embryos without your knowledge or consent, what then? Would you sue for custody? Try to take them away from me? Alexander's expression softened, surprising her. Is that what you fear? That I would try to separate you from the boys? Jessica didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. I would never do that to them, or to you. Alexander reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. They need their mother, but they also deserve to know their father. Jessica withdrew her hand, uncomfortable with the contact and the emotions it stirred. And what would that look like exactly? Weekend visits? Holidays? Shared custody? I was thinking of something more integrated. Alexander's gaze was steady. The three of you are already living in my building. The next logical step would be— No, Jessica interrupted, immediately understanding his implication. Absolutely not. We are not playing happy family, Alexander. That ship sailed years ago. I'm not suggesting we resume our marriage, he clarified, though something in his expression made Jessica wonder if that wasn't exactly what he was hoping for. But a cooperative parenting arrangement under one roof would provide the stability the boys need while allowing both of us to be fully present in their lives. It would never work. We'd end up at each other's throats within a week. Jessica shook her head. We couldn't make a childless marriage function. Adding 2 children to the mix would only create more tension. We failed before because I was absent, physically and emotionally, Alexander admitted, the candor in his voice catching Jessica off guard. I was so focused on building something meaningful that I neglected the most meaningful relationship in my life. I won't make that mistake again. Jessica stared at him, trying to reconcile this reflective man with the single-minded, work-obsessed husband she had left behind. People don't change that fundamentally, Alexander, not even for their children. Some do, he replied simply. I like to think I'm one of them. Their main courses arrived. Briefly pausing the conversation, Jessica found she had no appetite, though she made a pretense of eating to avoid drawing the server's attention. Let me ask you something, Alexander said after a few moments of silence. Why did you do it? Why use our embryos if you were so determined to leave our marriage behind? Jessica set down her fork, considering her answer carefully. The truth was complex, layered with emotions she had never fully articulated, even to herself. When I left New York, I was lost, she began slowly. Everything I had built my life around for a decade was gone. My identity had become so entwined with being your wife that I didn't know who I was without you. Alexander listened intently, his food forgotten. In Boston, I tried to start over, got a job at a small gallery, made a few friends. But there was this emptiness, this sense of incompleteness. Jessica took a breath, the memories still painful. Then I received a notice from the fertility clinic about the stored embryos. They needed a decision about continued storage. And you decided to use them, Alexander supplied when she paused. Not immediately. I thought about having them destroyed, as I told you yesterday. But the idea of those potential lives, our potential children, just ceasing to exist. She shook her head. I couldn't do it. So you chose to become a mother on your own. I chose to give those embryos a chance at life, Jessica corrected. My decision wasn't about you, or even about me. It was about them. They deserved to exist. But you never told me, Alexander persisted. You deprived me of the chance to be their father. Jessica met his gaze directly. Would you have wanted to be? Truly? The Alexander I knew was relieved when our IVF attempts failed. You said the timing wasn't right, that we should wait until the Asian expansion was complete, until the new product line was launched, until 1,000 different business milestones were achieved. Alexander flinched at the accuracy of her recollection. As I said, I've changed. Because you've seen them. Because they're real to you now. Jessica shook her head. It's easy to love children who are already here, Alexander. The hard part is making room for them in your life before they exist, prioritizing the possibility of them over immediate goals and ambitions. You're right. His admission surprised her. I wasn't ready then, but I am now. Jessica studied his face, searching for the familiar signs of calculation or manipulation she had come to associate with Alexander's business persona. But all she saw was earnestness, and perhaps a touch of vulnerability that reminded her of the younger man she had fallen in love with years ago. I need time, she said finally. This isn't a decision I can make over dinner, no matter how expensive the wine." Alexander nodded, accepting her hesitation. "Take all the time you need. But Jessica, please understand, now that I know about the twins, now that I've met them and spent time with them, I can't simply walk away. They're part of me, a part I didn't know was missing until I found them." Jessica recognized the determination in his voice. Alexander Morgan had built a business empire through relentless persistence and an unwavering focus on his goals. Now that focus had shifted to the twins, and she knew from experience that he would not be easily deterred. "I understand," she said quietly, "but Alexander, I need your promise that you won't tell them anything until we've agreed on how to proceed. They're too young to understand the complexities of this situation." "You have my word," he agreed solemnly. "But in return, I need your assurance that you won't disappear with them, that you'll allow me to continue seeing them while we work through this." Jessica nodded, the weight of their mutual promises settling between them. "Agreed." As they finished their meal in a silence that was not entirely uncomfortable, Jessica found herself dwelling on the twins' reactions to Alexander. They had taken to him with a readiness that surprised her, as if some cellular memory recognized a biological connection her words had denied. Perhaps children did possess an instinctive ability to recognize their own blood. Or perhaps more troublingly, they simply responded to the male attention they had never received, attaching themselves to the first father figure who showed genuine interest in them. Either way, Jessica knew the twins' enthusiastic acceptance of Alexander in their lives would make any attempts to limit his involvement more difficult and potentially more damaging to them emotionally. As Alexander escorted her out of the restaurant, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back in a gesture that felt both familiar and strange, Jessica was struck by the irony of their situation. For years during their marriage, she had longed for Alexander to want children as desperately as she did. Now, when it was too late for them as a couple, he had finally developed that desire, and with an intensity that both impressed and alarmed her. "I'll have Marcus drive you home," Alexander offered as the valet brought his car around. "No, thank you. I'll take a taxi." Jessica needed the space, the time alone to process everything that had been said. Alexander studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "As you wish. Good night, Jessica." "Good night, Alexander." As her taxi pulled away from the curb, Jessica watched Alexander standing outside the restaurant, his tall figure silhouetted against the lights of the city they had once conquered together. She had a sudden disorienting sense of worlds colliding, her past and present merging in ways she could never have anticipated. The twins would be sleeping when she returned home, their innocent faces peaceful, untroubled by the adult complications swirling around them. Tomorrow, they would wake excited about their new school, their new home, their new friend, Mr. Morgan, who showed them magic tricks and brought them books about dinosaurs and space. Soon, too soon perhaps, they would learn that Mr. Morgan was much more than a friend. That knowledge would change everything, for all of them. Jessica only hoped that when the dust settled, her sons would forgive her for the truths she had hidden and the choices she had made in what she had believed was their best interest. The next week passed in an uneasy truce. Alexander maintained a respectful distance, limiting his contact to occasional text messages inquiring about the twins' adjustment to their new school. Jessica appreciated his restraint, though she suspected it took considerable effort on his part. The twins, however, asked about him constantly. "When is Mr. Morgan coming to visit again?" became Ethan's daily refrain, usually over breakfast or during the bedtime routine. "He's very busy," Jessica would reply, the excuse wearing thinner each time. "Too busy for us?" Noah would ask, his small face falling with disappointment that twisted Jessica's heart. She had never intended to create this attachment, had never anticipated how quickly the twins would latch onto Alexander as a stable male presence in their lives. Their ready acceptance of him made her decision all the more complicated. On Friday afternoon, as Jessica waited outside Westside Academy for the twins to be dismissed, Her phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Ms. Whitman, this is Dr. Brenner from Gene Tech Laboratories." The woman's voice was professionally neutral. "I'm calling regarding the DNA analysis requested by Alexander Morgan." Jessica's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I haven't consented to any testing." Mr. Morgan provided the necessary samples and authorization. Dr. Brenner continued smoothly. "As this concerns paternity testing for minors, our protocol requires notification of the mother when results are available." "And are they?" Jessica asked, her throat suddenly dry. "Available, I mean." "Yes, Mr. Morgan has been informed and has authorized me to share the results with you directly." Jessica closed her eyes, mentally preparing herself for the confirmation of what she already knew. "Go ahead." "The probability of paternity is 99.999998%. Mr. Morgan is the biological father of both children. Even though she had expected this, the clinical confirmation sent a wave of dizziness through Jessica. She gripped a nearby railing for support. "Thank you for the information, Dr. Brenner. Mr. Morgan has requested the full report be sent to his attorney, James Jensen. If you would like a copy sent to your legal representation as well." "I don't have an attorney," Jessica interrupted. "But yes, I would like a copy sent to me directly." After providing her email address, Jessica ended the call just as the school doors opened and children began streaming out. The twins spotted her immediately, running across the playground with their backpacks bouncing. "Mommy, guess what?" Ethan exclaimed as he reached her. "Mr. Morgan came to our school today." Jessica's blood ran cold. "What?" "He brought books for our class," Noah explained, his eyes bright with excitement. "And he read us a story about a boy who built a rocket ship in his backyard." "Everyone thought he was super cool," Ethan added. "Ms. Peterson said he's a very important businessman who helps our school." Jessica forced a smile, hiding her anger. "That was nice of him. Why didn't you tell me he was coming today?" The twins exchanged glances. "We wanted it to be a surprise," Noah said, "like when we made you breakfast on your birthday." Jessica softened slightly at their innocent motivation, but her anger at Alexander remained. He had promised not to tell the twins anything until they agreed on a path forward, but visiting their school without her knowledge or consent felt like a deliberate boundary violation. As they walked toward the subway, Jessica still refused to use Alexander's car service for daily transportation. She texted him with fingers that trembled slightly. "Need to talk. Tonight, after the twins are asleep." His response came immediately. "I'll come by at 8. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a haze of homework supervision, dinner preparation, and bath time, all while Jessica's mind churned with the implications of the DNA results and Alexander's school visit. By the time she tucked the twins into their beds, they had opted to share the dinosaur-themed room, finding it comforting to sleep in the same space as they had in their old apartment. She had worked herself into a simmering anger. Alexander arrived precisely at 8, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Jessica's entire wardrobe, but managed to look effortlessly understated. She let him in without a greeting, leading him to the living room where they could talk without disturbing the twins. "You went to their school," she began without preamble, her voice low but intense. "Without telling me." Alexander had the grace to look slightly abashed. It was a last-minute decision. Westside was holding a reading day with parent volunteers, and the headmistress asked if I would participate since I'm a major donor. "That's not an excuse. You should have called me." "You're right," he conceded. "I should have. But Jessica, I didn't tell them anything about being their father. I was just Mr. Morgan, the businessman who supports their school." Jessica paced the room, trying to contain her frustration. "It's still a violation of our agreement. And then there's the DNA test. I received a call from the lab today." Alexander's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I see." "You knew what the results would show," Jessica accused. "You knew before you even ordered the test." "I suspected," he corrected. "But suspicion isn't certainty. And now that you have certainty, what are you planning to do with it? Alexander moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights before turning back to face her. That depends largely on you, Jessica, on what you're willing to accept. Meaning? Meaning I want to be their father, officially, legally, and in every practical sense. I want to be involved in their daily lives, their education, their futures. His voice grew more passionate as he continued. I've missed 4 years already. I don't want to miss another day. Jessica sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. It's not that simple, Alexander. You can't just decide to be a father overnight. I'm not, he countered, moving to sit opposite her. I've had a week to process this, to think about what it means. I've rearranged my entire schedule to create time for them. I've researched child development for 4-year-olds. I've even started looking into larger apartments in this building that would give us all more space. Us? Jessica caught the pronoun immediately. There is no us, Alexander. I told you at dinner, we're not playing happy family. Then what do you suggest? Splitting their time between 2 residences? Confusing them with complicated custody arrangements? Creating artificial separations between 2 parents who could easily provide a unified, stable environment? Alexander leaned forward, his expression earnest. Think about what's best for Ethan and Noah, Jessica, not what's most comfortable for you or me. The appeal to the twins' well-being was a direct hit, and Alexander knew it. Jessica had structured her entire life around providing stability and security for her sons, often at great personal cost. That's not fair, she said softly. You know I always put them first. I know you do. Alexander's tone gentled. It's one of the things I admire most about you. You're an incredible mother, Jessica. The boys are living proof of that. The unexpected praise disarmed her temporarily. Thank you. I'm not trying to replace you or diminish your role in their lives, Alexander continued. I just want the chance to be the father they deserve, the father I should have been from the beginning. Jessica studied his face, searching for signs of the calculating businessman she had known. But all she saw was genuine emotion, hope, determination, and something that looked surprisingly like fear. You're afraid, she realized aloud. What are you afraid of? Alexander hesitated, unaccustomed to such transparency. I'm afraid of missing more time with them, of being a stranger to my own sons, of failing them the way I failed you. The raw honesty in his admission caught Jessica off guard. This vulnerability was so unlike the Alexander she had married, the man who projected unwavering confidence in every situation, who viewed emotional displays as weaknesses to be overcome. I don't know if I can trust this version of you, she admitted. People don't change this fundamentally without reason. Near-death experiences have a way of shifting perspectives, Alexander said quietly. Jessica frowned. What are you talking about? Alexander unbuttoned his left shirt cuff, rolling it up to reveal a thin scar running along his forearm. 2 years ago, my plane went down during a snowstorm in the Alps. Small private jet, mechanical failure. The pilot was killed instantly. I was trapped in the wreckage for nearly 36 hours before rescue teams located us. Jessica stared at the scar, trying to process this information. I never heard about this. We kept it out of the press. Corporate stock prices tend to plummet when CEOs are involved in life-threatening situations. His attempt at humor fell flat. The point is, when you're alone in the freezing cold, certain you're going to die, your priorities become remarkably clear. And you realized you wanted children? Jessica's skepticism was evident. I realized I wanted a life that meant something beyond quarterly reports and acquisition strategies. Alexander rolled his sleeve down, refastening the cuff. I wanted the life we had planned together before I allowed myself to be consumed by the company. Jessica absorbed this revelation in silence. It explained some of the changes she had observed in him, the patience with the twins, the willingness to engage on a personal level rather than defaulting to business tactics. but it didn't erase the fundamental issues that had destroyed their marriage. "Even if I believe you've changed," she said carefully, "that doesn't mean we can simply reconstruct a family unit as if the past 5 years never happened. We're different people now, Alexander. Our relationship ended for valid reasons." "I'm not suggesting we pretend otherwise," Alexander clarified, "but we could create something new, a parenting partnership based on mutual respect and the boy's best interests." Living together? Jessica remained skeptical. "It would provide the most stability for Ethan and Noah," Alexander reasoned. "But if that's too much, we could start with structured visitation and gradually work toward a more integrated arrangement." Jessica considered this compromise. It was more reasonable than she had expected, acknowledging her concerns while still prioritizing the twins' needs. "I need to think about this," she said finally, "and we need to talk about how to tell the twins. They're too young to understand the complexity of the situation." Alexander nodded. "I've been reading about age-appropriate ways to explain donor conception and complex family structures to young children. There are some excellent books designed specifically for this purpose." Jessica couldn't help but smile slightly. "Of course you've been researching this." "Thorough preparation has served me well in business," Alexander replied with a hint of his old confidence. "I see no reason it wouldn't apply to parenting as well." Before Jessica could respond, a small voice interrupted from the hallway. "Mommy?" They both turned to see Noah standing in the doorway, his favorite stuffed elephant clutched to his chest, sleek rumpled hair sticking up in all directions. "Hey, buddy," Jessica said gently. "What are you doing up?" "I had a bad dream," Noah murmured, rubbing his eyes before noticing Alexander. His face brightened immediately. "Mr. Morgan, you came back." Alexander smiled, his expression softening in a way that transformed his features. "I did, but it's very late, and little astronauts need their sleep." "Will you read me a story?" Noah asked hopefully. "The one about the boy and the rocket?" Alexander glanced at Jessica, clearly seeking permission. After a brief hesitation, she nodded. "One short story," she stipulated, "then right back to sleep." Noah beamed, padding across the room to take Alexander's hand with the easy trust of childhood. "Come on, the book is in our room." As Alexander allowed himself to be led down the hallway, Jessica followed, watching from the doorway as he settled in the reading chair between the twins' beds. Ethan, who could sleep through almost anything, remained deeply asleep, while Noah climbed back into his own bed, expectantly awaiting the story. Alexander began to read, his deep voice softening as he narrated the tale of a boy who built a rocket from household items and imagined traveling to distant planets. Noah's eyelids grew heavier with each page, and by the time Alexander reached the end, the boy was fast asleep once more. Alexander carefully closed the book and placed it on the nightstand, then tucked Noah's blanket more securely around him. The gesture was so tender, so paternal, that Jessica felt a lump form in her throat. This was what she had wanted during their marriage. To see Alexander embrace fatherhood with this natural affection and care. The irony that it had taken separation, secrecy, and an accidental reunion to bring it about wasn't lost on her. As Alexander tiptoed out of the room, carefully closing the door behind him, Jessica found herself reevaluating her position. Perhaps his proposal of a gradual integration deserved serious consideration, not just for the twins' sake, but for Alexander's as well. He had missed so much already. First words, first steps, countless milestones that could never be recaptured. "Thank you," she said quietly as they returned to the living room. "You're good with them." "They make it easy," Alexander replied, genuine warmth in his voice. "They're extraordinary children, Jessica. Intelligent, compassionate, curious, everything parents hope for." "They are," she agreed, pride evident in her tone. "And they deserve to know their father, to have you in their lives in a meaningful way." Alexander's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the significance of her statement. "Does that mean—" "It means I'm willing to try your suggestion. A gradual integration, starting with regular visitation and working toward a more comprehensive arrangement. Jessica held up a hand to forestall his eager response. But we proceed at the twins' pace, not yours. Their emotional well-being comes first, always. Agreed, Alexander said immediately. Completely agreed. And we consult a family therapist, Jessica added. Someone who can help guide us through this process and monitor the twins' adjustment. Alexander nodded. I'll have Clara research the best child psychologists specializing in family restructuring. No, Jessica countered firmly. I'll find someone neutral who isn't on your payroll. Alexander accepted this boundary without argument, another sign of his changed approach. Of course. And we'll need a formal legal agreement, Jessica continued, thinking through the practicalities. Something that protects the twins' interests and clearly outlines our respective roles and responsibilities. I'll have Jensen draw up a draft for your review, Alexander offered. Something equitable that acknowledges your role as their primary caregiver while establishing my parental rights. Jessica nodded, the reality of what they were agreeing to beginning to sink in. After years of being the twins' only parent, their sole decision-maker and provider, she would now be sharing that responsibility with Alexander. The prospect was both relieving and terrifying. This is really happening, she murmured, more to herself than to Alexander. He moved closer, not touching her but offering his presence as reassurance. We can make this work, Jessica. For them. Jessica met his gaze, seeing the determination and commitment reflected there. Despite everything, the past hurts, the years of separation, the secrets and revelations, they were still connected by the two small boys sleeping peacefully down the hall. Their shared love for the twins created a foundation on which they might build something neither of them had anticipated. A new kind of family, shaped by the complexities of their past, but focused entirely on the future. For them, Jessica agreed softly, sealing the beginning of their new journey together. The first step in their carefully choreographed plan was selecting the right moment and method to tell the twins about Alexander. After consulting with Dr. Evelyn Carter, a child psychologist specializing in family transitions, they decided on a weekend approach that would give the boys time to process the information without the additional stress of school. Remember, Dr. Carter had advised during their joint session, 4-year-olds understand relationships primarily through their daily experiences. Abstract concepts like biological connections and donor conception are less important to them than knowing who loves them and cares for them consistently. Now, as Jessica arranged a simple breakfast on Saturday morning, she felt her stomach knot with anxiety. Alexander would be arriving soon, and together they would begin the conversation that would irrevocably change their family dynamic. "Mommy, are we having pancakes?" Ethan asked, climbing onto a stool at the kitchen island, his hair still rumpled from sleep. "Yes, sweetheart. Blueberry pancakes, your favorite." Jessica managed a smile, flipping a perfectly golden disc onto a warming plate. "And guess what? Mr. Morgan is coming over this morning. He has something special to talk to you about." Noah, trailing into the kitchen after his brother, brightened immediately. "Is he bringing more books?" "Maybe," Jessica hedged. "But that's not the special thing." Before the twins could press further, the doorbell rang. Jessica checked her watch, 9 a.m. exactly. Alexander's punctuality remained one constant in their shifting relationship. "I'll get it!" Ethan scrambled down from his stool and raced to the door, Noah close behind. Jessica heard their excited greetings, followed by Alexander's deeper voice responding with equal enthusiasm. When they returned to the kitchen, the twins were each clutching a gift bag. "Look what Mr. Morgan brought us," Noah exclaimed, already peering into his bag. Jessica raised an eyebrow at Alexander, who had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "Just some small things I thought they might enjoy," he explained. "Can we open them now?" Ethan asked, bouncing on his toes. Jessica nodded, recognizing that the gifts might provide a positive association for the conversation to come. The twins eagerly pulled out their presents. building sets designed to work together, creating a space station with launching rockets when combined. Wow! Noah's eyes widened. It's like our bedrooms. That's right, Alexander said, crouching down to their level. One is space-themed, like your room, Noah, and one has dinosaurs, like yours, Ethan. But when you put them together, they make something even more special. Jessica recognized the metaphor immediately, subtle enough for adult understanding, but concrete enough for the twins to grasp the underlying message of connection and complementary parts forming a whole. "Why don't we eat breakfast first?" she suggested, "and then we can all talk in the living room." The meal passed with cheerful conversation, the twins eager to tell Alexander about their week at school, their new friends, and the class turtle named Herbert, who had escaped his tank but was found hiding behind the bookshelf. Alexander listened attentively, asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than mere politeness. Jessica observed the interaction with a complex mixture of emotions. There was the expected anxiety about the conversation to come, but also a surprising sense of rightness in seeing Alexander with the twins. The three of them shared mannerisms she had never noticed before. The way Noah tilted his head when considering a question, exactly as Alexander did. The precise manner in which Ethan arranged his napkin beside his plate, a gesture she had seen Alexander perform countless times during their marriage. After breakfast, they moved to the living room. Jessica and Alexander sat on the sofa, while the twins settled on the plush rug, still examining features of their new toys. "Boys," Jessica began, her voice gentle but firm, "Mr. Morgan and I have something important to tell you." The twins looked up, their expressions curious but not concerned. Jessica glanced at Alexander, who gave her an encouraging nod. "You know how every child has a mommy and a daddy even if they don't always live together?" she continued. The twins nodded, familiar with this concept from friends at school who had divorced parents. "Well, Mr. Morgan isn't just my friend from a long time ago. He's actually your daddy." A moment of silence followed as the twins processed this information, exchanging glances in that silent communication Jessica had observed since their infancy. "But you said our daddy was gone," Noah said finally, his brow furrowed in confusion. "I know, sweetheart," Jessica acknowledged, "and that wasn't completely true. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the whole story before." "The truth," Alexander interjected gently, "is that your mom and I were married a long time ago before you were born. But I didn't know about you until very recently when we saw your mom on the street that day." "You didn't know we were born?" Ethan asked, clearly struggling to understand. "No, I didn't," Alexander confirmed, his tone honest but carefully modulated. "If I had known, I would have been part of your lives from the very beginning." "So you're really our daddy?" Noah pursued, his expression brightening with dawning comprehension. "Like Tommy's daddy who picks him up from school sometimes?" "Yes," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am really your daddy, and I would very much like to be part of your lives now, if that's okay with you." The twins looked at each other again, then at Jessica, seeking confirmation or reassurance. She nodded, forcing a smile despite the tears threatening to spill. "It's true," she affirmed. "Mr. Morgan, your daddy, wants to spend time with you and get to know you better." Another moment of silence stretched between them as the twins considered this new reality. Then, with the adaptability of childhood, Ethan broke into a wide smile. "Cool, now we have a daddy too." He turned to Noah, "And he already knows how to read the rocket book just right." Noah seemed more thoughtful, studying Alexander's face with an intensity that belied his 4 years. "If you're our daddy, do we have to call you something different now? Not Mr. Morgan?" Alexander glanced at Jessica before answering. They had discussed this possibility but agreed to let the twins set the pace. "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable," he said. "Some kids call their dad Daddy or Dad, or even by their first name. It's up to you." Noah considered this seriously. I think I'll try Dad, he decided. It's what Jeremy calls his daddy at school. I want to call you Daddy, Ethan declared, not to be outdone by his brother. Alexander's eyes glistened suspiciously. I'd like that very much. Does this mean you'll live with us now? Ethan asked, moving to the practical implications with a child's directness. No, not right now, Jessica answered before Alexander could speak. Your daddy has his own home, but he'll visit often, and sometimes you'll stay with him too. We're going to figure it all out together. The twins seemed to accept this arrangement without concern, more interested in the immediate implications of having Alexander acknowledged as their father. Can we show Daddy our toys? Ethan asked, already standing up. And my drawing that Ms. Peterson said was super good? Of course, Jessica agreed, relieved at how smoothly the conversation had progressed. Why don't you both take him to your room and show him everything? As the twins eagerly led Alexander down the hallway, chattering about their precious possessions they wanted to share, Jessica remained on the sofa, allowing herself a moment to absorb what had just occurred. The truth was out, at least the version appropriate for 4-year-olds, and the boys had accepted it with surprising ease. Dr. Carter had prepared them for various reactions: confusion, anger, rejection, excessive attachment. But the twins' response had been remarkably balanced, accepting this new reality with the resilience children often demonstrate in the face of life's complexities. When Alexander returned to the living room nearly an hour later, his expression was one of quiet wonder. They're asleep, he said softly, settling beside her on the sofa. All that excitement wore them out. They rarely nap anymore, Jessica mused. The emotional processing must have exhausted them. They're incredible, Jessica. Alexander's voice was thick with emotion. The way they understand things, the questions they ask, their perspective on the world, I've never experienced anything like it. Jessica smiled. Welcome to parenthood. They'll amaze you every day and frustrate you just as often. I can't wait for all of it. Alexander's sincerity was palpable. Even the frustrating parts. You say that now, Jessica teased gently. Wait until you've experienced a full meltdown in the cereal aisle because they can't agree on which cartoon character should grace their breakfast table. Alexander chuckled. I'll handle it with the same strategic approach I use for hostile corporate negotiations. Let me know how that works out for you. Jessica's smile faded slightly as she considered the practical aspects of their new arrangement. We should discuss logistics, how often you'll visit, when they'll stay with you, how we'll handle holidays and birthdays. I was thinking I could come by every evening this week, Alexander suggested. To help with dinner and bedtime, establish a routine. Then perhaps they could spend next Saturday at my penthouse, get comfortable with the space. That seems reasonable, Jessica agreed. But we need to maintain some consistency in their schedule. They're still adjusting to the new school and apartment. Of course. I'll work around whatever routine you've established. Alexander hesitated before continuing. I've been thinking about the larger living arrangements as well. Jessica tensed. Alexander. Hear me out, he requested. I'm not suggesting we rush into anything, but there's a duplex apartment available on the 15th floor. 2 separate living spaces connected by a shared common area. It would give all of us privacy while allowing the boys to move freely between both parents without leaving the building. Jessica considered the proposal. It was actually more thoughtful than she had expected, acknowledging her need for independence while prioritizing the twins' access to both parents. That's creative, she admitted, but it's still a significant step. We don't have to decide now, Alexander assured her. The apartment isn't going anywhere. I own the building, remember? Jessica rolled her eyes, though without real annoyance. How could I forget? They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the tension of the morning giving way to a tentative sense of accomplishment. The first hurdle had been cleared, and while many challenges remained, they had managed this crucial step together successfully. You know, Alexander said thoughtfully, When I saw you on the street that day, I was angry. I thought seeing you struggling financially would give me some sense of vindication after you left." Jessica winced but didn't interrupt. "Instead, it led me to the most important discovery of my life." Alexander's gaze was steady, sincere. "Whatever happened between us in the past, Jessica, I will be eternally grateful to you for our sons." The simple truth of his statement touched something deep within her. For all his flaws and despite the complexities of their history, Alexander Morgan was now committed to being a father to the twins, the role she had once despaired of him ever embracing. "They're lucky to have you," she said quietly. "I can see already how much they respond to you, how natural you are with them." "I had excellent motivation to learn quickly," Alexander replied with a small smile. "And a steep learning curve ahead of me still, I'm sure." Jessica nodded, thinking of all the parenting challenges she had navigated alone over the years. The sleepless nights, the illnesses, the developmental milestones and setbacks. Alexander had missed so much, but there were still countless experiences ahead. First days of kindergarten, learning to read, losing teeth, making friends, developing personalities and preferences that would grow more distinct as they aged. "We should let them sleep a bit longer," she suggested. "Then perhaps we could all go to the park this afternoon. They love the playground at Central Park, but we haven't been able to visit since moving here." "I'd like that," Alexander agreed. "Our first official outing as a family." He hesitated over the word, testing its appropriateness in their unique situation. Jessica didn't correct him. Whatever they were now, co-parents, former spouses, reluctantly reunited through extraordinary circumstances, partners in the complex project of raising children together. Family was as good a term as any to describe their connection. The twins woke from their nap refreshed and bubbling with excitement about their park adventure. As they helped them bundle into jackets against the October chill, Jessica noticed how seamlessly Alexander had begun to integrate himself into their routine, holding out Noah's jacket sleeve just right so his arm could slide in easily, checking that Ethan's shoelaces were securely tied, remembering that Noah preferred his water bottle in the left side pocket of his backpack. These were small details, the kind that parents learned gradually through daily interaction. That Alexander had observed and remembered them so quickly spoke to his genuine desire to know the twins as individuals, not merely as extensions of himself or fulfillments of some paternal ideal. At the park, Alexander pushed the boys on the swings, chased them through the playground equipment, and helped them construct an elaborate leaf pile for jumping. Jessica watched from a nearby bench, allowing herself a moment of cautious optimism. This new version of Alexander, patient, engaged, willing to get his expensive clothes dirty for the sake of the twins' entertainment, was everything she had once hoped he might become. The circumstances were far from what she had imagined, but perhaps this unexpected path might still lead to a future where Ethan and Noah had two loving, committed parents in their lives. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, Jessica called the twins for their return home. They protested briefly, as children always do when enjoyment is interrupted, but acquiesced when Alexander suggested they could stop for hot chocolate on the walk back. Walking through Central Park, the twins between them holding one hand each, Jessica caught Alexander's gaze over their heads. His expression held a contentment she had rarely seen during their marriage, a quiet joy unrelated to business achievements or material acquisitions. In that moment, despite all the complexities yet to be navigated, Jessica felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever the future held, today had been a good beginning. The first step toward a new kind of family none of them had anticipated, but which might, with care and commitment, become something stable and nurturing for the two small boys who deserved nothing less. Over the next month, their carefully constructed co-parenting arrangement evolved with surprising smoothness. Alexander visited every evening, arriving just in time to help with dinner and staying through the bedtime routine. Weekends were split between activities as a group and special daddy days when Alexander would take the twins on adventures around the city, to museums, parks, or child-friendly restaurants that catered to their developing palates. The twins flourished under the new arrangement, their natural resilience allowing them to adapt to Alexander's presence in their lives with an ease that sometimes left Jessica marveling. They had accepted the revised narrative of their family history without apparent trauma, asking occasional questions that she and Alexander answered honestly but age-appropriately. "Why didn't you know about us when we were babies?" Noah had asked Alexander one evening as he helped tuck the boy into bed. Alexander had paused, meeting Jessica's gaze across the room before answering carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make complicated decisions that even they don't fully understand. Your mommy and I weren't together anymore, and there were mix-ups in communication. But the important thing is that I know about you now, and I'm never going to miss another day of your lives if I can help it." The answer had satisfied Noah, who nodded sagely before requesting his favorite space book for the third night in a row. For Jessica, the adjustment proved more challenging. Having Alexander reintegrated into her daily routine stirred conflicting emotions: appreciation for his genuine commitment to the twins, wariness about his long-term intentions, and an unsettling awareness of how easily they had fallen into a rhythm that sometimes felt disconcertingly like the early, happier days of their marriage. She found herself noticing things about Alexander that she had either forgotten or never fully appreciated during their years together. His unexpected patience with the twins' endless questions, the way he listened intently when they spoke as if their 4-year-old observations were as valuable as any corporate briefing, his willingness to set aside his phone and give them his undivided attention during their time together. It was during the third weekend of their new arrangement that the first significant challenge arose. Jessica had been preparing the twins for their day with Alexander, who had planned to take them to the Natural History Museum to see the dinosaur exhibition that Ethan had been talking about all week. "I can't find Mr. Trunks," Noah wailed, tears streaming down his face as he frantically searched under his bed. Mr. Trunks, a well-worn stuffed elephant that had been his constant companion since infancy, was nowhere to be found. "When did you last have him, sweetheart?" Jessica asked, joining the search. "Last night. He was right here." Noah pointed to his pillow, his distress growing. "I can't go without Mr. Trunks. What if the dinosaurs are scary?" Jessica exchanged a glance with Ethan, who was already dressed and impatient to leave. "Maybe we can find him when we get back," she suggested gently. "Daddy will keep you safe at the museum." "No!" Noah's tantrum erupted with full force, his small body collapsing onto the floor in heartbroken sobs. "I need Mr. Trunks. I can't go without him." Jessica tried every tactic in her parental arsenal, reasoning, distraction, offering alternatives, but Noah remained inconsolable. Ethan, initially sympathetic, grew increasingly frustrated as the minutes ticked by. "It's just a stupid elephant," he finally burst out. "Now we're going to miss seeing the T-Rex because of your dumb toy." "Ethan," Jessica admonished, "that's not helpful. Mr. Trunks is important to your brother." "But it's not fair!" Ethan's face crumpled, tears welling in his eyes. "I've been waiting all week and now we can't go because Noah's being a baby." The situation was rapidly deteriorating when Alexander arrived, taking in the scene of dual meltdowns with a momentary look of alarm before composing himself. "What's happening here?" he asked, his tone calm but authoritative. Through hiccuping sobs, Noah explained the tragic disappearance of Mr. Trunks and his absolute refusal to face dinosaurs without his protective elephant. Ethan, still sniffling, voiced his competing disappointment about the potentially ruined outing. Jessica expected Alexander to side with Ethan, to prioritize the planned activity over Noah's emotional attachment to a stuffed toy. It's what the old Alexander would have done, focused on the objective, dismissing emotional obstacles as inconvenient disruptions to be overcome through logic or simply ignored. Instead, he surprised her. "I understand both of you," he said, crouching down to their level. Noah, it's scary when something important to us goes missing, and Ethan, it's disappointing when plans we're excited about get changed. The twins, startled by this acknowledgement of both perspectives, quieted their tears slightly. Here's what we're going to do, Alexander continued. First, we're going to have a proper search party for Mr. Trunks. Ethan, you're appointed chief search officer for the kitchen and living room. Noah, you and I will recheck the bedrooms. Your mom can take the bathrooms and closets. We'll spend exactly 15 minutes looking, and if we haven't found him by then, we'll move to Plan B. What's Plan B? Noah asked, his interest piqued despite his distress. We'll go to the toy store first and find a temporary dinosaur protection companion who can pinch hit for Mr. Trunks today. Then we'll go to the museum as planned. And when we come home, we'll keep looking for Mr. Trunks with fresh eyes. Alexander looked at both boys. Does that sound fair to everyone? The twins considered this proposal with surprising seriousness before nodding in agreement. Alexander handed his expensive watch to Ethan. You're in charge of the timer. 15 minutes starting now. The search commenced with military precision, all 4 of them tackling their assigned areas. Jessica, checking the hall closet, found herself both impressed and slightly unsettled by Alexander's effortless management of what had seemed like an irresolvable crisis moments earlier. 13 minutes into the search, a triumphant shout came from the kitchen. Found him, Ethan declared, holding up the bedraggled elephant. He was in the snack cabinet. Noah raced to reclaim his beloved companion, clutching him to his chest with tearful relief. Thank you, Ethan. You saved him. The crisis averted. They departed for the museum only slightly behind schedule, the emotional storm fully dissipated. In the quiet moment, as the twins ran ahead to the elevator, Jessica found herself studying Alexander. That was well handled, she admitted. I was about to cancel the whole day. Alexander shrugged. Corporate crisis management has some surprisingly relevant applications to parenting, it seems. Acknowledge emotions, provide a structured response, and offer contingency plans. Still, I'm impressed. The Alexander I knew would have been impatient with that level of drama over a stuffed toy. Something flickered in his expression. Regret, perhaps, or simply recognition. The Alexander you knew missed out on a lot of important things by prioritizing the wrong metrics for success. At the museum, Jessica observed how seamlessly Alexander managed the twins' different interests, lingering with Ethan at the dinosaur exhibits while ensuring Noah, whose enthusiasm waned faster, remained engaged through interactive elements and carefully timed snack breaks. By the time they returned home, exhausted but happy, it was clear that Daddy Days had become a beloved fixture in the twins' lives. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Jessica and Alexander sat in the living room with glasses of wine, reviewing the day in the comfortable shorthand that parents often develop. Noah's getting better about sharing, Jessica observed. Did you notice how he offered Ethan the last of the pretzels without prompting? And Ethan asked if Noah wanted to see the Stegosaurus even though it wasn't on his personal must-see list. Alexander smiled. They're good kids, Jess. You've done an amazing job with them. We're doing okay now, she corrected gently. They need both of us. Alexander's expression softened. Thank you for that. It means a lot, especially coming from you. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only when Alexander's phone buzzed with an email notification. He checked it briefly before setting the phone aside. Everything okay? Jessica asked, noticing a slight shift in his demeanor. Just work. They can wait until tomorrow. He took a sip of wine. Actually, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. Jensen has finished drafting the co-parenting agreement we talked about. I'd like you to review it when you have time. Make any changes you feel are necessary. Jessica nodded, appreciating his professional approach to their arrangement. I'll look at it tomorrow. There's one other thing, Alexander continued, his tone carefully neutral. The duplex apartment I mentioned is ready for viewing. No pressure, but if you're interested in seeing it... Jessica hesitated. She had been thinking about the duplex proposal more than she cared to admit. The current arrangement, while functional, had its limitations. The twins were increasingly confused about why Daddy couldn't stay for just one more story, or why he had to leave after dinner each night. "I could look at it," she said finally, "just to see what the layout is like." Alexander nodded, clearly pleased, but trying not to show it too openly. "I can arrange a viewing whenever you're ready." The conversation drifted to more immediate concerns. The twins' upcoming parent-teacher conference, Noah's persistent reluctance to try new foods, Ethan's newfound interest in piano lessons. It was familiar and comfortable, this shared focus on their son's well-being, and Jessica found herself relaxing into the rhythm of co-parenting in a way she hadn't anticipated. As the evening drew to a close, Alexander gathered his coat and keys. This was the part that still felt awkward. The nightly departure, the twins' questions the next morning about when Daddy would return. "They had a good day," Jessica said as she walked him to the door. "You're really getting to know them as individuals. It's good to see." Alexander paused in the doorway, his expression thoughtful. "I keep thinking about all the days I missed. First steps, first words, all those moments that can never be recaptured." "You're here now," Jessica reminded him. "That's what matters to them." "And to you?" The question was quiet, tentative in a way the old Alexander never would have been. Jessica considered her answer carefully. "It matters that you're consistent, that you keep showing up, not just when it's convenient or fun, but when it's hard too, like today with the Mr. Trunks crisis." "I meant what I said before," Alexander replied. "I'm not missing another day if I can help it. They're the most important part of my life now, more important than any deal or company or acquisition." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Jessica found herself believing him despite years of evidence to the contrary. People could change, perhaps, or at least they could reprioritize, especially when confronted with something as life-altering as discovering they had children. After Alexander left, Jessica checked on the twins one last time before preparing for bed. They slept peacefully, Noah clutching the rescued Mr. Trunks, Ethan with a small plastic dinosaur Alexander had purchased at the museum gift shop nestled beside his pillow. Looking at them, Jessica felt a complex surge of emotions. Gratitude that they now had their father in their lives, pride in the resilient little people they were becoming, and a cautious hope for the future they were all building together. The next morning, she texted Alexander, "Let's see the duplex. Tomorrow at 10? His response came immediately. "Perfect, I'll arrange it." Jessica set her phone down, surprisingly calm about what would once have seemed an unthinkable step. She wasn't committing to anything permanent by viewing the apartment, she reminded herself. It was merely exploring an option that might benefit the twins by providing them more consistent access to both parents. Yet as she helped the boys prepare for school, listening to their excited chatter about yesterday's museum adventure and eager questions about when they would see Daddy again, Jessica couldn't deny that something had shifted in her own perspective. The careful boundaries she had established around Alexander's involvement were softening, not because of any romantic rekindling. She was adamant about maintaining that separation, but because she recognized that his presence had brought joy and stability to her sons' lives. Whether that presence would continue to be managed through carefully scheduled visits or evolve into a more integrated living arrangement remained to be seen. But for the first time since their reunion, Jessica found herself genuinely open to possibilities she would have dismissed outright just weeks earlier. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming back?" Ethan asked as she helped him with his jacket. "Tomorrow evening," she answered. "And guess what? We're going to look at a new apartment tomorrow morning, one where Daddy could be closer to us all the time." The twins' faces lit up with identical expressions of delight, confirming what Jessica already knew in her heart. Whatever complications existed between her and Alexander, whatever past hurts and misunderstandings still needed resolution, the twins' happiness had to be her guiding principle. And right now, their happiness was inextricably linked to having both parents actively involved in their daily lives. "Will Daddy live with us then?" Noah asked hopefully. "Not exactly," Jessica explained. "He would have his own space, and we would have ours. But you could see him more easily, maybe even have breakfast with him sometimes before school." "That would be awesome," Ethan declared with 4-year-old enthusiasm. "Then he could read us stories every night." Jessica smiled, touched by their uncomplicated joy at the prospect of increased access to their newly discovered father. "We'll see, sweetheart. First, we need to look at the apartment and decide if it's right for all of us." As they headed out the door for school, Jessica found herself looking forward to tomorrow's viewing with cautious optimism. Whatever happened next, she was increasingly confident that they were moving in the right direction. However unconventional the path might be, the duplex apartment exceeded even Jessica's mental preparations. Occupying the entire 15th floor of Alexander's building, it was essentially 2 separate homes connected by a shared central area that included a spacious living room, dining space, and state-of-the-art kitchen. "The West Wing would be yours and the twins," Alexander explained as they toured the space without the boys who were at school. "4 bedrooms, including a master suite for you and rooms for each of the boys. The East Wing has my office bedroom and guest quarters for when my mother visits from London." Jessica wandered through the enormous space, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the tasteful decor that somehow managed to be both luxurious and child-friendly, and the thoughtful details that demonstrated Alexander's consideration of their needs. "You've already furnished it," she observed, noticing the rocket-themed bedroom that was clearly designed for Noah and the dinosaur paradise that would delight Ethan. "Just the children's rooms and the common areas," Alexander clarified. "Your spaces are empty, waiting for your preferences. The designer can work with whatever style you prefer." Jessica ran her hand along the smooth marble countertop in the kitchen. "This is a lot, Alexander. It's practically a mansion in the sky." "Too much?" he asked, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "I can look for something smaller if you'd prefer." "It's not that." Jessica struggled to articulate her hesitation. "It's beautiful, and the layout makes sense for our situation. But I can't help feeling that accepting this means accepting more than just a living arrangement." Alexander leaned against the counter, maintaining a respectful distance between them. "You're worried about the implications. About us." "Yes," Jessica admitted. "The twins already ask why you can't stay overnight. If we move in here, with this shared space between our separate areas, the lines become blurred. It will feel like a family home." "Isn't that what we're trying to create? A family home for the boys?" "But we're not a traditional family, Alexander. We're not together. This arrangement could confuse them even more about our relationship." Alexander considered this thoughtfully. "What if we established clear boundaries? Your wing is your private space, mine is mine. We share the common areas when we're both home with the twins, but we maintain our separate lives otherwise." "And what about when you start dating again?" Jessica challenged. "How will you explain to the twins why your girlfriend is in your wing of the apartment but doesn't join us for family dinners?" A flicker of something, discomfort perhaps, crossed Alexander's face. "I'm not interested in dating right now. The twins are my priority." "Right now, yes, but eventually you'll want companionship, a relationship. The Alexander Morgan I knew wouldn't stay single for long." The words came out more sharply than she intended, revealing a lingering bitterness she hadn't fully acknowledged. Alexander was quiet for a moment. "I deserved that," he finally said. "But Jessica, I meant what I said before. I've changed. My priorities have shifted." "People don't change fundamentally," Jessica repeated her earlier assertion, though with less conviction. "Some do," Alexander insisted, "when the stakes are high enough." He moved closer, not touching her but ensuring she met his gaze. "I know my track record doesn't inspire confidence. I know I've failed you, failed us, before. But I'm asking you to judge me on my actions now, not on who I was 5 years ago." Jessica turned away, needing distance from the intensity of his gaze and the sincerity that was increasingly difficult to dismiss. She walked to the windows, looking out over the city sprawled beneath them. "The boys would love it here," she admitted softly. "The space, the proximity to you, the security of having both parents easily accessible." "They would," Alexander agreed, joining her at the window but maintaining that careful distance. "And it would make the logistics of co-parenting infinitely simpler. No more complicated scheduling, no more confusion about why Daddy has to leave every night." Jessica thought about their current routine. Alexander's nightly departures that always triggered questions from the twins, the limited time together constrained by practical considerations, the growing sense that they were creating artificial separations in what had become, for all practical purposes, a family unit. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "It's a big step." "Of course." Alexander's acceptance was immediate and without pressure. "The space isn't going anywhere. Take all the time you need." That evening, after Alexander had left following the usual dinner and bedtime routine, Jessica sat alone in the quiet apartment, weighing her options. The duplex was perfect for their needs, offering the twins stability and access to both parents while preserving separate spaces for her and Alexander. From a practical perspective, it made complete sense. Her hesitation stemmed from something deeper, a fear not of the arrangement itself but of what it might eventually lead to. The boundaries between co-parenting and rekindling their relationship could easily blur in such close proximity. And despite Alexander's changed priorities and consistent commitment to the twins, Jessica wasn't sure she could risk her heart again with a man who had once relegated her to second place in his life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "No pressure about the apartment. Whatever you decide will make our arrangement work for the twins." The message exemplified the new Alexander, patient, respectful of her boundaries, prioritizing the twins' well-being above his own preferences. It was this consistent pattern of behavior over the past weeks, rather than any grand gestures or declarations, that had begun to rebuild her trust in him as a father, if not yet as a partner. The next morning, Jessica woke to Ethan crawling into her bed, his small body warm against hers. "Mommy, I had a dream about the new apartment," he mumbled sleepily. "We were all having breakfast together, you and me and Noah and Daddy, and nobody had to leave." Jessica stroked his hair, her heart constricting at the simple longing in his voice. "That sounds like a nice dream, sweetheart. Can we live there, Mommy? The place where Daddy would be close all the time?" Before she could answer, Noah appeared in the doorway, Mr. Trunks dangling from one hand as he rubbed sleep from his eyes with the other. "I want Daddy to be here in the mornings, too," he contributed, climbing onto the bed to join them. Then he could make those pancakes with the funny faces every day. Jessica gathered both boys close, inhaling the sweet scent of their hair, feeling the solid weight of their small bodies against hers. They had adapted to so many changes in their young lives. The move from Boston, the financial struggles, the discovery of their father, the transitions between homes and schools. Through it all, they had shown remarkable resilience, asking only for the security of having both parents present and engaged in their lives. Could she deny them that stability because of her own fears and reservations? Was protecting herself from potential heartbreak worth continuing the artificial separation that confused and disappointed her sons daily? Later that morning, after dropping the twins at school, Jessica texted Alexander, "Can we talk? Coffee at that place near your office in an hour?" They met at the small cafe where Alexander had once conducted business meetings during their marriage. He arrived precisely on time, dressed in one of his impeccable suits, but with a slightly loosened tie that suggested a less rigid adherence to corporate formality. "Thank you for meeting me," Jessica began after they had ordered. "I've been thinking about the duplex." Alexander nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "And? I think it makes sense for the twins. The arrangement. The space, the continuity of having both of us easily accessible. Jessica traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. But I need absolute clarity about what this means for us. For you and me. Whatever you want it to mean, Alexander replied simply. I won't pressure you, Jessica. I know I lost that right when I prioritized everything else above our marriage. And if all I want is a co-parenting relationship, if I make it clear that living in connected spaces doesn't mean reconnecting romantically, then that's what we'll have. His voice was steady, sincere. The twins are what matter most. Creating a stable, loving environment for them is my priority. And I know it's yours, too. Jessica studied his face, searching for any hint of calculation or hidden agenda. But all she saw was the same genuine commitment he had demonstrated consistently since discovering the twins. A father determined to do right by his children, whatever the personal cost. Okay, she said finally. We'll try the duplex arrangement, but with clear boundaries and expectations. We're not reconciling or rebuilding our marriage. We're creating a new kind of family structure for the sake of our sons. Alexander's relief was visible, though tempered with respect for her terms. Understood. I'll have Jensen revise the co-parenting agreement to reflect the new living arrangement and your concerns. And we should talk to Dr. Carter about how to explain this to the twins without creating confusion about our relationship. Already scheduled for Thursday afternoon, Alexander replied. I thought we might need her guidance regardless of your decision. Jessica smiled despite herself. Always prepared. Some things don't change. Some things shouldn't, he countered with a small smile of his own. The move to the duplex took place 2 weeks later, a carefully orchestrated transition designed to minimize disruption to the twins' routine. They were ecstatic about their new bedrooms and the large playroom that Alexander had outfitted with everything from building blocks to art supplies to a small indoor slide for rainy days. The first evening in their new home, Jessica prepared dinner in the shared kitchen while Alexander helped the twins unpack their remaining toys. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on her. This could easily have been their life years ago if different choices had been made, different priorities established. As they gathered around the dining table, Ethan looked between his parents with a satisfied expression. Now we're like a real family, he declared. Just like Jeremy's family, except his mommy and daddy sleep in the same room. Jessica froze, her fork halfway to her mouth, but Alexander handled the comment with easy grace. Families come in all different arrangements, buddy, he explained. Some parents sleep in the same room, and some have their own spaces. What makes a real family isn't where people sleep. It's how much they love each other and take care of each other. Ethan considered this thoughtfully before nodding. And you love us a whole lot, right? More than anything in the entire world, Alexander confirmed, his gaze briefly meeting Jessica's over the twins' heads. Both of us do, Jessica added softly. Later, after the twins were asleep in their new beds, Jessica found Alexander in the shared living room reviewing documents on his tablet. He looked up when she entered, setting the device aside immediately. Another small but significant change from the husband who had once remained glued to his work regardless of her presence. The boys settled in okay? He asked. Perfectly. They're exhausted from all the excitement. Jessica sat in the armchair opposite him, maintaining the physical distance that had characterized their interactions outside of parenting duties. Thank you for handling Ethan's comment about real families. That was well navigated. I've been doing a lot of reading on blended and non-traditional families, Alexander admitted, trying to understand how to make this work without confusing them. Jessica nodded, appreciating his effort. We're in uncharted territory here. There's no guidebook for our specific situation. We'll write our own, Alexander suggested with a slight smile. The Morgan Whitman Guide to Post-Divorce Embryo Co-Parenting. The joke surprised a laugh from Jessica, the tension of the day releasing slightly. I'm sure it would be a bestseller. They fell into a comfortable silence, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. the faint sound of the twins' nightlight music drifting from the hallway. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Jessica asked finally. "This unconventional arrangement, I mean. Will it really benefit them in the long run?" Alexander considered the question seriously. "I think having two parents who respect each other and prioritize their well-being will benefit them, regardless of the living arrangement. The rest, we'll figure out as we go." Jessica thought about the journey that had brought them to this point, from their chance encounter on the street to the revelation of the twins' paternity to this carefully constructed new family structure. None of it had been planned. None of it followed the path she had envisioned when she left their marriage 5 years earlier. Yet somehow, it had led to something that felt right for their sons, if still complicated for them as individuals. "We'll need to keep communicating," she said, "being honest about what's working and what isn't." "Absolutely." Alexander's agreement was immediate. No more assumptions or uncommunicated expectations. That's what went wrong before. As Jessica rose to return to her wing of the apartment, Alexander remained seated, respecting the boundaries they had established. But his voice stopped her at the threshold. "Jessica," he said softly, "thank you for giving me the chance to be their father, for creating this opportunity to know them. Whatever happens between us, I will never stop being grateful for that gift." The simple sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her, a recognition that despite their complex history, they had created something beautiful together in Ethan and Noah. And now, in this unconventional arrangement born of chance and necessity, they were building something new, a family defined not by traditional structures, but by love, commitment, and the shared priority of their children's happiness. "Good night, Alexander," she replied, her voice warm with the acknowledgement of how far they had come. "Good night, Jessica." As she walked through the connecting hallway to her private wing, Jessica felt a sense of peace settle over her. The future remained unwritten, the path forward still uncertain in many ways, but for tonight, her sons slept peacefully in rooms carefully designed for their comfort and joy, secure in the knowledge that both their parents were present and committed to their well-being. It wasn't the family structure she had once imagined, nor the life she had planned. But watching Alexander with the twins, patient, engaged, his focus entirely on their small faces as they shared their days with him, Jessica found herself increasingly certain that sometimes the most unexpected paths could lead to exactly where you needed to be. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.